Chapter 878. The person who spoke was naturally White Yiksha, who had followed behind. Speaking of which, Villo, you're really omnipotent. White Yiksha crossed her arms as she floated beside Wu Ming. She was also receiving the baptism of the rain of life. The last trace of her mental exhaustion had also completely disappeared. This rain of life is enough to heal all the injured. I'll take my leave then. I won't be participating in the reconstruction of the outer sect of 54545. After all, there were still many things to deal with. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Hey! Why don't you leave Vera behind? White Yiksha roared in annoyance. Vera can't help much anyway. It's not like she's missing. Wu Ming's voice came from the sky. Immediately after, black-purple ripples appeared. Wu Ming and Vera's figures disappeared. Seriously, my role is really just to clean up this Villo's mess. Although her tone was helpless, White Yiksha wasn't dissatisfied. After knowing that absolute evil had broken through the seal, she had thought of many endings. Now, all she had to do was sacrifice land and towns to kill absolute evil. It couldn't be better. Moreover, other than a small number of people who died because of the chaos at the beginning, there were basically no more casualties. Because of Wu Ming's reign of life, everyone's physical injuries and mental exhaustion had recovered. It could be said that everyone was happy. White Yiksha's mood was much better after eliminating absolute evil at such a low price. Even if she had to clean up someone else's mess, White Yiksha was happy. Go and make the final speech. After White Yiksha finished speaking, she flew down. After all, in the absence of Vera, only White Yiksha could make the final declaration of victory. At that moment, in a place far away that was not affected by the rain of life, a few people who were obviously Salamandra were carrying a person who had fainted from the ups and downs of the journey. They were still speeding up. Lord Mandela, we're almost at the next outer sect. You have to hold on. However, at that moment, Mandela could no longer speak. Immediately after, Mandela's head tilted and he completely fainted. Lord Mandela. Between 399999 and 400000 was the place where the fire dragon's birth ceremony was held. As they had confirmed that absolute evil's doppelganger had completely disappeared, the restoration work had already begun. Whether it was the ground or the houses, they were all being restored by professionals with their blessings. The undamaged bell tower was the fastest to be repaired. At the highest point of the bell tower, dark purple ripples appeared, and Wu Ming, who had already transformed into his human form, emerged with Vera in his arms. Wu Ming sighed as he gently put Vera down. Previously, Wu Ming still had business to attend to, so he didn't pay much attention to Vera's body. Now that he had relaxed, Wu Ming realized how ridiculous Vera's body was. Where is this? Vera had some impression of this place because Wu Ming had asked Vera to wait for him here. Sorry, I've never been to the Northern District before. I'm only familiar with this place. Sitting on the edge of the bell tower, Wu Ming took a deep breath and exhaled. It had to be said that no one would come here. Moreover, at such a high place, the fresh but not cold air could also clear one's mind. Why did Villo bring me here? Imitating Wu Ming, Vera also sat on the edge of the bell tower, right next to Wu Ming. I wanted to tell you that Maxwell is dead. Wu Ming's words made Vera's body tremble, but it was only a slight tremble. Vera was clearly shocked. What, you don't believe me? Wu Ming put his hands on the edge and turned to look at Vera. Vera shook her head silently. I was just shocked. She wasn't shocked that Wu Ming killed Maxwell. Vera was shocked that she had forgotten the beginning. Vera only now realized that she and Wu Ming only wanted to deal with Maxwell in the beginning. When they met Maxwell in the outer gate of 54,545, Wu Ming signaled for Vera to leave temporarily and deal with Maxwell alone. Then, for some reason, the human final trial sealed under Raging Flame City was released. Raging Flame City and even the entire outer gate of 54,545 fell into the territory. The entire outer gate of 54,545 also turned into Az-Dakaha's Demon Denver. After that, Vera and the surrounding outer gate communities formed a not-so-good alliance. Vera really didn't know what to do next. She did have many methods, but when facing the black mud, she couldn't use them, or they were completely ineffective. She believed that Wu-Ming, who was still in the black mud den, would be fine. She had no basis, just pure trust. From the beginning, when Wu-Ming was willing to help Vera deal with Maxwell, Vera also began to trust Wu-Ming. However, she was still worried. In the end, she could only pray that White Yiksha could come as soon as possible, or that the Sky Army of the upper echelons of the Box Court could come as soon as possible. However, who would have thought that Wu-Ming would be able to kill absolute evil? Moreover, he had used so many amazing moves. Even White Yiksha's understanding of Wu-Ming was renewed. Vera, who didn't know as much about Wu-Ming as White Yiksha, also had a renewed understanding of Wu-Ming. Therefore, Vera wasn't surprised that Wu-Ming, who could kill absolute evil, could also kill Maxwell. Don't you want to know how I killed Maxwell? Wu-Ming was a little depressed. No. Vera shook her head hard. The existence of foul on her chest also shook a little. The corner of Wu-Ming's mouth twitched slightly. He silently turned his head and no longer looked at Vera. Maxwell is dead. You don't have to hide anymore. This was the message Wu-Ming wanted to convey to Vera. In Wu-Ming's opinion, a large part of the reason why Vera didn't have a fixed place to stay all day was because of Maxwell's pestering. Now, Vera could stay in the community obediently and take on the responsibility of being the leader of the community. However, why did Vera wander around all day? Vera was probably the only one who knew. Wu-Ming suddenly thought of something and looked at Vera again. By the way, Vera, Maxwell dropped a gift after his death. Are you interested? It could be said that Vera helped Wu-Ming lure Maxwell out. If they were to split the loot, Vera would definitely have a share. At that moment, Vera shook her head frantically. At the same time, Vera's chest trembled. Okay, I got it. Wu-Ming, who turned his head again, sighed. Sure enough, even if Maxwell was dead, Vera still didn't want to have anything to do with him. Then, the gift that Maxwell dropped could only be enjoyed by Wu-Ming alone. Then, Wu-Ming turned his head again to look at Vera. I'll send you home. After all, Vera shouldn't have returned to her community for a long time. It just so happened that she could go back now. Home. Not knowing what to think, Vera smiled and nodded. Chapter 879. Inside the inherent enchantment of the staff of Anzavulgan, the 7th floor, the lava zone. Galgi sat alone on a higher rock with his eyes closed as if he was resting. Although the terrain was higher, the rock was still slightly red due to the temperature of the lava zone. Not only that, but the surrounding temperature also made Galgi quite uncomfortable. Helplessly, he could only silently half-activate the simulated another cosmology to resist the heat of the rock and the surrounding temperature. At this moment, there was a spatial fluctuation around Galgi. A black-purple ripple appeared, and Wu-Ming jumped out from it. After sending Vera off, Wu-Ming immediately came here. He had something to discuss with Galgi. You don't look too bad. Wu-Ming joked with Galgi. Galgi opened his eyes and looked at Wu-Ming, his eyes full of shock and fear. He didn't know what he saw and couldn't remember it at all. It was as if he had seen something beyond his level. His brain began to tremble, and his body began to feel uncomfortable as if he was about to explode and die. Galgi subconsciously cancelled the half-activated simulation of another cosmology, bent over, and kept retching. Ugh, if Galgi had the courage to resist Wu-Ming before, then he had no thoughts of resisting the current Wu-Ming. Would ants try to kill Earth? Ants didn't have such thoughts at all. They didn't even realize what Earth was. At this moment, Galgi was somewhat similar to an ant. However, this ant realized what Earth was, so he couldn't resist at all. Moreover, it was as if understanding what Earth was beyond the scope of understanding for an ant like him. Galgi's body couldn't bear it and was about to explode. Wuming silently frowned when he saw Galgi like this. Why is Galgi so rude? He vomits as soon as he sees someone. However, what Wuming didn't know was that the reason why Galgi was like this was because the half-activated simulated cosmology allowed Galgi to see the high-level Wuming. If Galgi fully activated the simulated cosmology, he would probably explode on the spot with just a glance. Wuming was a little unhappy at this moment. He didn't care about Galgi and let him retch alone. Galgi retched for a while and spat out some unknown liquid, which was instantly evaporated by the high temperature of the lava field. Then, Galgi tried to raise his head again and look at Wuming. Sure enough, after cancelling the simulation of another cosmology, Galgi's feeling of looking at Wuming again was not much different from before. Galgi himself also understood that it was probably the simulation of another cosmology that allowed Galgi to glimpse a corner of Silent Cry's true self. After adjusting his state of mind, Galgi stood up with a respectful attitude. At this moment, Galgi no longer had any thoughts of resisting Wuming. Are you okay? Wuming looked at the strange Galgi and was puzzled. Why is he so respectful after vomiting? I'm fine, Sir Villo. May I ask what happened to absolute evil? Galgi looked at Wuming respectfully. Az Dakaha is dead. Wuming wasn't used to Galgi's attitude. Wuming turned his head and didn't look at Galgi. He really is dead. Galgi wasn't surprised, as if he took it for granted. This puzzled Wuming. You killed him, didn't you? This piqued Wuming's interest. Galgi clearly knew that humans wouldn't be killed by non-human existences in the final trial, and this information was given to Wuming by Galgi. So why was he so sure that Wuming had killed Az Dakaha? How so? Wuming asked. The aura you give me now is very different. There was a hint of seriousness in Galgi's respectful eyes, as if he wanted to get to know Wuming all over again. Right now, I don't have any thoughts of resisting you at all. It was mainly because of the half-activated simulated cosmology that Galgi saw some existences in Wuming that he couldn't understand and couldn't bear. After all, Galgi had been considering whether to fully activate the simulated cosmology to kill Wuming immediately after Wuming appeared. In the end, he had almost died. Galgi now understood why Wuming dared to leave him alone. It was because Wuming had that kind of strength. The corner of Wuming that Galgi saw could completely reflect Wuming's strength. Even if the simulated cosmology was the power of a universe group, it couldn't instantly kill a bug like the root dragon. At most, it could only cause some damage. After all, it must be known that Galgi was able to see those things just now because of the simulation of another cosmology. Since he was able to see the truth of silent wonder, it would at least have some effect. But it was probably only a little. Moreover, if Galgi really used the simulated cosmology to launch his sneak attack on Wuming, today would probably be his death anniversary. I was indeed the one who killed Az Dakaha. Wuming had no intention of hiding it. Instead, he openly admitted it. But Wuming didn't say how he killed Az Dakaha. However, Galgi didn't need Wuming to tell him. What a joke. He almost died just by looking at Az Dakaha, so how could it be difficult for Az Dakaha to deal with absolute evil? Immediately after, Wuming said. By the way, Maxwell is also dead. Galgi was taken aback. Before the battle with absolute evil, Wuming clearly told Galgi that Maxwell was captured by Wuming. And now, Galgi and Wuming had only met for less than a day, and Galgi was told by Wuming that Maxwell was dead. No matter how one looked at it, it was full of contradictions. But immediately after, Galgi calmed down. Logically speaking, Wu Ming wouldn't lie about such a thing. In other words, Maxwell died during this period of time, or Wu Ming immediately executed Maxwell after killing Az Dakaha. The correct answer was that Maxwell died during this period of time. The boon game that Wu Ming set up for Maxwell was to defeat the host in a specified location and time. After Galji killed Wu Ming's clone with another cosmology, Wu Ming created another clone and got it to accompany Maxwell while he went to look for Galji. At that time, Maxwell wasn't dead yet, so Wu Ming wasn't lying when he told Galji and the others that Maxwell was captured by me. And now, Maxwell was naturally executed as a death penalty by the boon game. Not to mention that Silent had already left, leaving behind only a doppelganger. Maxwell couldn't even beat a doppelganger. Silent's doppelganger watched as Maxwell gradually went crazy due to the approaching death. In the end, it was punished by the bestowment game, turning into light and disappearing. And the reason why Galji calmed down was naturally because he realized the problem. Based on the indescribable truth that he saw about Wu Ming, how could the current Wu Ming not be able to kill Maxwell? Chapter 880. Moreover, as Vera had previously understood, Wu Ming was an existence that could even kill humans in the final trial. How could he not be able to deal with a mere 4-digit number of demon kings? I understand. Thank you, Sir Villo, for helping me get rid of Maxwell. Galji respectfully thanked Wu Ming. After all, Maxwell was someone sent by the higher-ups to monitor them, and Galji wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. Do you know the secret of Maxwell's immortality? Wu Ming suddenly asked Galji. Galji revealed an expression as if he already knew. Sir Villo, I know the power in Maxwell's body. It's the power of the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. So you do know. Wu Ming said as he waved his hand, and a small ball of light filled with a strange light appeared in Wu Ming's hand. The ball of light emitted a strange light that seemed to be constantly moving. This was the source of Maxwell's power that Galji had mentioned, the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. Wu Ming didn't know much about science. When Wu Ming arrived at the 5th floor of Nazalik and his doppelganger handed the ball of light to Wu Ming was still confused. The appraisal of the third perpetual motion mechanism was done by Collis. Collis had a large amount of information stored in her database, and with her processing system, as well as Collis' highest-grade magic attire, as well as the influence of her origin power, Collis could easily do this. Moreover, Collis had also made the same judgment on the already dead Maxwell. Maxwell was a hypothetical, humanoid demon, or similar mechanism proposed by the British physicist James Clerk Maxwell that could detect and control the movement of a single molecule. Later generations called it a hypothetical spirit, or demon. Maxwell was a demon born from a paradox that was denied from the beginning, so he naturally didn't have a physical body. As a hypothetical demon born from this paradox, his strength couldn't even withstand a slightly stronger physical attack. But because of the third perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell combined it with his own characteristics of not having a physical body to be able to produce himself infinitely and resurrect instantly after death. However, even with the perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell couldn't resist the rules of the box. Maxwell was successfully killed by Wu Ming using the gift game, and the perpetual motion mechanism naturally became the dropped item that killed Maxwell. After all, this third perpetual motion mechanism wasn't Maxwell himself. According to Collis, the third perpetual motion mechanism was a byproduct of Maxwell. In that case, could Maxwell, who could freely control Absolute Evil's doppelganger, have something to do with Absolute Evil Azidakaha? However, after having this thought, Wu Ming immediately stopped thinking. In any case, those two fellows had already been killed. What was the point of pondering over this? After Maxwell died, he dropped this ball of light. Wu Ming wasn't afraid that Galji would snatch it away, so he openly showed it to Galji. Congratulations, Sir Villo. Galji smiled as if it was from the bottom of his heart, and this made Wu Ming feel quite awkward. But I presume that you don't need this now that you've fully recovered, right? Galji's words had a hidden meaning. You've already guessed it. Wu Ming wasn't surprised. Galji's fully recovered referred to Wu Ming's recovery of his body. Galji had seen Wu Ming before, or rather, he had seen Wu Ming wrapped in black mud. Although he didn't know where he had seen it, Galji was completely certain that he had seen Wu Ming's body before. Moreover, Galji's mind wasn't the same as 16 nights. After calming down, he probably realized that Wu Ming, who killed absolute evil, had already retrieved Wu Ming's body. And if Galji had really seen Wu Ming's body, he would naturally understand that Wu Ming didn't need the third perpetual motion mechanism that much. You want it? Wu Ming looked at Galji with a playful expression and tossed the 2 balls of light in his hands. To tell you the truth, we've already figured out Maxwell's nature. We originally planned to kill him after this incident. Galji's words implied that the perpetual motion mechanism was something that they had long planned to use, but who knew that it would be intercepted by Wu Ming halfway. So, you want to continue the deal with me? However, Wu Ming was amused by his own words. I'm afraid you haven't realized the situation you're in, Your Highness. Although all of Galji's subordinates addressed Galji as Your Highness, it was rather ironic for Wu Ming to say these 2 words. Putting aside the fact that your another cosmology is useless against me, even if you have other trump cards, do you think they will work on me? It wasn't that Wu Ming was arrogant, but his body had experienced countless years of accumulation in the box court world. Even though it was still underage, it was only a step away from adulthood. In Wu Ming's knowledge, an adult origin dragon and an underage origin dragon were 2 different species. If an underage origin dragon was considered a living creature, an adult origin dragon was no longer a living creature. As for what it was, Wu Ming would only know after he became an adult. All in all, even though Wu Ming wasn't an adult origin dragon, Wu Ming, who was only a step away from adulthood, was no longer the same as before. Wu Ming was so powerful that even Wu Ming, who had returned to his body, was taken aback. If Wu Ming's strength were to be classified according to the box court world strength, Wu Ming's strength would definitely be in the double digits. As for why it wasn't in the single digits, it was because, firstly, Wu Ming wasn't sure about the strength of the single digits. Secondly, Wu Ming's strength might have exceeded the single digits and reached an unmeasurable level. If it were an adult Wu Ming, there wouldn't be a need to worry because an adult origin dragon would definitely exceed the single digits. But it was also important to clarify that Wu Ming's hypostasis had only become in existence in the double digits. In other words, he had completely embodied the hypostasis that an origin dragon should have, unlike before, when any random person dared to provoke Wu Ming. Of course, Wu Ming had always subconsciously concealed his hypostasis, but Wu Ming didn't realize it. After all, whether it was the world that Wu Ming lived in or everyone in this world, their hypostasis was lower than Wu Ming's. If Wu Ming completely released his aura, anyone who sensed the aura of a higher hypostasis would die instantly. At that moment, Galji became extremely respectful. It was precisely because he had glimpsed Wu Ming's hypostasis when he activated the simulation of the another cosmology that he survived. But it was also because of this that Galji was completely convinced by Wu Ming. At the very least, Galji would never go against Wu Ming again in the future. He didn't even have any thoughts about it anymore. This came from the bottom of his heart like a different kind of curse. Therefore, Galji wouldn't make any more deals with Wu Ming. Chapter 881. You're wrong, Lord Villo. What I meant was that you can use this on your subordinates. Galji smiled and shook his head. If it was the old Galji, he might have tried to make a deal with Wu Ming. However, after being affected by Wu Ming's hypostasis, he had no intention of taking advantage of Wu Ming or even making a deal with him. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have to ensure your subordinates' loyalty. However, Wu Ming looked at Galji strangely. What's wrong with this guy? Master, I'm afraid he saw your hypostasis and was affected by you. Collis directly spoke to Wu Ming in Wu Ming's mind. Did he pry into my status? Wu Ming immediately thought of pest. He didn't know what Pest had seen when he was summoned, but his attitude toward Wu Ming had completely changed. Unlike Galji's respect, Pest's attitude toward Wu Ming was one of extreme fear. Pest could see Wu Ming's true self because he had established a master-slave relationship with Wu Ming. However, how could Galji see his true self? My aura is indeed suppressed, isn't it, Collis? Wu Ming asked Collis. Since Wu Ming had just returned to his body, he might not have gotten used to it yet. Thus, Wu Ming had Collis monitor his condition. Master, your aura has been subconsciously suppressed by you. It doesn't seem to have been released. Collis had indeed been monitoring Wu Ming's condition, but Wu Ming had been subconsciously suppressing his aura all this time. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have leaked out. Could it be that the another cosmology simulation allowed Galji to see my hypostasis? Wu Ming thought about it. Perhaps only the another cosmology simulation could allow Galji to see his true self. Moreover, his current hypostasis wasn't something someone like Galji could withstand. The difference between the old Wu Ming and the current Wu Ming was like a balloon filled with slow air and a balloon filled with water. As long as the balloon didn't burst, the latter's fall from a high altitude was more lethal than the former's. If Galji had looked at him for a while longer, he might have really died. But now, Galji seems to be very respectful toward me. Wu Ming had an idea. Galji. What is it, Lord Villo? Galji looked at Wu Ming. Tell me everything about the person behind you. That's right, Wu Ming was trying to use Galji's current state to get information about the person behind Galji. But Galji shook his head. Lord Villo, I'm afraid that won't do. It seemed that even if Galji was very respectful, he wasn't at the point where he would listen to Wu Ming's every word. Master, he clearly respects you because of your strength. Everyone knows that respecting the strong is common knowledge in any world. Collis complained in Wu Ming's mind. I know. I just want to try. Wu Ming replied to Collis in his mind with some regret. However, Wu Ming had other ways to get Galji to reveal information. Let's make a deal, Galji. You tell me everything about the person behind you, and I'll deal with them. Wu Ming's words made Galji's eyes light up. After all, when Galji first learned of Wu Ming's existence, he wanted to make a deal with Wu Ming. He would provide the information, Wu Ming would help him deal with the enemy, and he would gain his freedom. Although they had fallen out before, Galji, who was now affected by Wu Ming's status, was naturally shaken when he heard this deal. 21053880 Outer Gate, No Name's Base Camp. At this moment, in No Name, Black Rabbit, Letitia, 16 Nights in Reverse, Jo Yuasuka, and Kasuga Hikari stood at the entrance of No Name, ready to go. Ren, Lily, and Pest stood at the entrance and watched the five of them leave. Black Rabbit, Letitia, when you reach the North District, you must take care of 16 Nights and the others. Ren reminded Black Rabbit worriedly. I'll try my best, young Master Ren. Black Rabbit looked at the three problem children who were full of fighting spirit and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead helplessly. Although Letitia was also helpless, she still comforted Ren. Don't worry, Ren. Master is still in the North District. When the time comes, there's no need to worry about not being able to control these three. What a joke. When we reach the North District, I must teach that bastard Villo a lesson. There's a demon king and he didn't call me. 16 Nights in Reverse was very excited. He looked like a wild horse that was about to explode. Same. Seconded. Jo Yuasuka and Kasuga Hikari agreed in unison with 16 Nights in Reverse. The two of them were also people who wanted to see the world in chaos. Don't joke around, stupid adults. According to Lord White Yiksha, the Demon King this time is the absolute Demon King of one of the humans' final trials. That's one of the strongest in Hakata. If you continue to underestimate the enemy like this, Black Rabbit won't bring you along. Black Rabbit reprimanded from the side. These 3 problem children were too noisy. The enemy this time was clearly not easy to deal with. That's right, when White Yiksha went to the North District, he sent a letter to No Name. The content was that the seal of absolute evil had been broken. However, White Yiksha had been in the North District for a long time, and No Name had just reorganized their people and prepared to support the North District. It was completely because they could not make a decision. The main reason was that 16 Knights and the other 2 were too suitable for their identity as problem children. They clamored about fighting the Demon King. That was absolute evil, a Demon King with a 3-digit number. Even people with a 2-digit number did not dare to underestimate it. It was fundamentally different from the Demon King that 16 Knights and the other 2 had dealt with during their time in Hakata. If they let the problem children go, who knew what kind of trouble they would cause? They might even lose their lives. In the end, Black Rabbit and 16 Knights and the other 2 came to a compromise before they were ready to go. However, No Name was actually not too late. White Yiksha wrote a letter to tell No Name that it was only because Wuming was fighting against absolute evil in the North District. Most of the communities in the East District, more than 99% of them, did not even know that absolute evil had broken the seal in one of the humans' final trials. After all, when Glowing Flame Capital was attacked, many people did not know that absolute evil had broken the seal. Therefore, No Name was not too late. Seeing the 3 problem children obediently shut their mouths, Black Rabbit sighed again. Problem children were just too difficult to deal with. Right on the heels of that, Black Rabbit patted his face to encourage himself. Black Rabbit revealed a smile and raised an arm high. Then, everyone, let's go. It had to be said that Black Rabbit looked like he was going on a vacation. It looked like he had underestimated the enemy even more. The 3 problem children complained in their hearts. Right on the heels of that, the 3 problem children looked at each other and smiled tacitly. When they reached the North District, Black Rabbit would be completely useless. However, at this moment, a familiar voice entered everyone's ears. Where are you going? Chapter 882. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound and saw Wuming standing there, his face full of confusion. Wuming had just returned to No Name when he saw the other members of No Name about to go on a long journey. How could he not be confused? Villo, Mr. The members of No Name screamed as if they had seen a ghost. What's wrong? Everyone shouted in unison, causing Wuming to be stunned for a moment. What the hell happened? Mr. Villo, weren't you fighting against Absolute Devil King in the North District? Black Rabbit's ears twitched, looking confused. I killed the Devil King, and then I came back. Wuming's tone was very calm, as if he was saying, I came back after eating. But everyone had different reactions when they heard this. Ren and Black Rabbit were shocked, Restia was proud of Wuming, the 3 problem children were unhappy, and Pest was indifferent. After that, Wuming shrugged his shoulders and no longer cared about his companions, who he didn't know what they were doing. He walked straight into the interior of No Name. I'll go back first. Wait. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, that was Absolute Devil, how could you kill him so casually? Black Rabbit turned around and wanted to chase after Wuming, but because he was too excited, his footsteps were a little shaky. I didn't kill Absolute Devil casually, I fought with him for a day and a night before I killed him. Wuming replied without turning his head. Although he said that, it still didn't seem like it was difficult for him to kill Absolute Devil King. Furthermore, Reverse 16 Knights was very unhappy. Not bad, Mr. Villo, you actually took the big prize without anyone noticing. Reverse 16 Knights said as he suddenly jumped up and kicked at Wuming. Clatter, a golden chain suddenly emerged from Silent Cry's clothes like a cold spear. The sharp end of the chain was aimed at 16 Knights, who was trying to turn back. Realizing that the chain was not ordinary, 16 Knights did not choose to fight it head-on. Instead, he changed his movement in mid-air and kicked the chain directly. Bang! The deafening sound of steel colliding rang out, and the airwaves produced by the collision spread out, impacting everyone. This caused Black Rabbit and the others to subconsciously raise their hands to resist the airwaves. At the same time, Wu Ming's aura changed and a tyrannical aura enveloped everyone present. However, the aura disappeared in an instant and everyone felt as though they were hallucinating. In the next second, the originally rigid chain became like an extremely resilient steel whip, ruthlessly lashing toward 16 knights who had yet to land on the ground. 16 knights reacted instantly and kicked the golden chain. With the help of the reaction force of the golden chain, he jumped back into the air and did a 360-degree spin before landing steadily. Everyone looked at Wu Ming and 16 knights in a daze. They could not tell whether the terrifying aura just now was an illusion or real. However, because the terrifying aura appeared for less than a tenth of a second, no one could tell whether it was real or an illusion. "You've become stronger, Villo." Reverse 16 Knight's face was filled with an excited smile. He was excited that Wu Ming, a strong opponent, had become stronger. "Just as you saw, I accidentally found my body, so my strength is naturally different from before." After comforting Enkidu, Wu Ming put the chain back into his sleeve and turned to look at everyone. "So, Mr. Villo found his body. That's great, congratulations." Black Rabbit subconsciously felt happy that Wu Ming found his body. However, Black Rabbit immediately reacted. "Wait, that's not the point. Don't fight in front of our community." Black Rabbit rushed towards Reverse 16 Knights in a frenzy, trying to subdue this problematic child who started the fight. "Stop, Black Rabbit, I won't fight anymore." However, Reverse 16 Knights stopped Black Rabbit with words. "Villo has become beyond my imagination. I can't beat him now." Reverse 16 Knights shook his head silently. "Ha!" Black Rabbit, who came to Reverse 16 Knights' side, made a strange sound. Reverse 16 Knights, this problematic child, actually admitted that he was not a match for Garen and stopped the fight. Did the sun rise from the west? The truth was not as exaggerated as Black Rabbit thought. It was just that Reverse 16 Knights was more aware of Wu Ming's strength than the others. When Enkidu helped Wu Ming block Reverse 16 Knights' attack, Wu Ming subconsciously wanted to fight back. However, he did not control it well and almost used his full strength. After all, Wu Ming and Az Dakaha were fighting too intensely. During that one day and one night of fighting, although Wu Ming did not really use his full strength, every move he made was not casual either. It might not be strong for Az Dakaha, but for the people in the middle and lower levels of the community, it was a very strong move. In short, Wu Ming was used to fighting seriously. When faced with Reverse 16 Knights' greeting kick, he almost became serious. However, even so, Reverse 16 Knights was still aware of the difference between the two of them. He was no match for Wu Ming now. Reverse 16 Knights was not someone who did not know when to back down. He still had some self-awareness. Moreover, this was just Reverse 16 Knights' greeting to Wu Ming. He did not have any intention of fighting Wu Ming properly. Even if he did, he would not fight in front of so many people in no name. Therefore, it was impossible for them to fight. Black Rabbit was worrying too much. "When I become stronger, let's fight again." Reverse 16 Knights revealed an unruly expression and looked at Wu Ming with joy and anticipation. "No, it's too troublesome." After Wu Ming finished speaking, he turned around and walked into No Name again. Reverse 16 Knights did not mind and followed Wu Ming into No Name. After all, if they really wanted to fight, it was not something that could be rejected just because one of them was unwilling. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, you have to explain the matter of the Absolute Demon King," Black Rabbit said and immediately chased after Wu Ming. "Let's go everyone, it's time to go back," Letitia said and walked back into No Name. In the end, our anticipation was in vain. Not good. Jiu Yuao and Hiroi Hiroyuki looked at each other helplessly and followed Letitia for a while. Ren looked around. Other than himself, only Pest was left. However, before Ren could say anything, Pest snorted coldly and silently walked into No Name. Ren smiled awkwardly and walked into No Name unhurriedly. As the leader of the community, Ren successfully became the last member to enter his community. Chapter 883. In the No Name chat room, everyone sat together and chatted with Wu Ming. They learned about absolute evil bit by bit from Wu Ming. So that's how it is. Mr. Villo has experienced quite a lot of things along the way. Black Rabbit pointed at several things that Wu Ming said. Fighting with the undying Demon King, fighting with the heroes born in the apocalypse, and finally fighting with the humans in the final trial. I'm jealous. 16 Nights wished he could replace himself with Wu Ming to experience all that. 16 Nights was excited just by thinking about it. Who knew how happy Wu Ming, who had experienced all that, would be? But that's only for Villo. If it were us, our lives would be in danger. Zhou Yuan Fei now held her teacup and took a sip gracefully. Letitia said, agreeing with Zhou Yuan Fei Niao's words. Yes, Fei Niao is right. Other than Maxwell, whether it's Galgi with his another cosmology or absolute evil in the final trial, they are all very strong enemies for you. Even I would have a hard time winning against them. 16 Nights, on the other hand, didn't care. How would I know if I don't try? I have to see it with my own eyes before I comment. The more dangerous the enemy, the more he liked it. After all, they were problem children. I just didn't expect that Galgi would have another cosmology. It's really surprising. Ren was quite concerned about Galgi, who looked to be the same age as him. By the way, what's this another cosmology? Zhou Yuan Fei Niao raised a question. Oh right, Miss Fei Niao, you guys have just arrived at the box court. I'm afraid you guys don't know about another cosmology. It seemed like Black Rabbit wanted to explain. To put it simply, it contains the powerful gift of cosmology. It can be infinitely magnified to interfere with the powerful forces of the outside world. Every another cosmology is unique, which means that every another cosmology has different abilities. Zhou Yuan Fei Niao nodded thoughtfully. Simply put, it's an extremely powerful gift. You can think of it that way, Miss Flying Bird. However, another cosmology is much more precious and powerful than ordinary gifts. After all, Black Rabbit did not simulate the another cosmology and could not explain it in detail. It could only give Long Flying Bird a general understanding. Wu Ming interjected. It is said that the existence with the simulated cosmic atlas has the potential to become the center of a group of gods. Because of the power of the simulated cosmic atlas, I am afraid that only those with the simulated cosmic atlas can compete with it. Wu Ming recalled how Galgi had killed Wu Ming's doppelganger by forcibly activating the simulated another cosmology. It could be said that if it was not Wu Ming's doppelganger that was killed, but the spiritual base body, that blow would have also killed Wu Ming's spiritual base body. Therefore, in Silent's opinion, to fight against that kind of power, unless they also have the simulated cosmology, they can only fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Otherwise, only Silent, the bug, can fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Interesting, a simulation of an alien cosmology. 16 Nights Reversal smiled, but no one knew what he was thinking. However, Black Rabbit was frightened by 16 Nights Reversal's smile. 16 Nights, San, don't think too much. Black Rabbit has a feeling that you will do something. Black Rabbit said as he looked at Zhou Yuan Fei Niao and Hiroi Biao. Really, these problem children were too good at causing trouble. Black Rabbit had to be prepared for a rainy day. Then, Black Rabbit noticed that Hiroi Biao seemed to be thinking about something. Miss Biao, what's troubling you? Although they were problem children, they were all companions. Black Rabbit was happy to help his companions solve their problems. "I'm a bit concerned about the griffin Willow mentioned." Haruai Biao hugged Sanmao Cat and said the reason for his deep thoughts. "Is it the genome tree on the griffin?" Wuming guessed the reason for Haruai Biao's concern. This was something that Wuming mentioned before. "Yes." Haruai Biao nodded. "The genome tree was a gift from my father, and according to what Willow said, the genome tree on the griffin seems to be almost complete." In this way, Haruai Biao had to guess whether the griffin was related to his father. "That's easy. Just ask the griffin," Wuming said casually. Everyone was shocked. "But, Willow-san, can you find the griffin?" Black Rabbit was puzzled. "Of course I can. Galji's group is still trapped in my inherent barrier," Wuming explained and then looked at everyone innocently. "Didn't I say that?" "You didn't say that." Everyone shouted at Wuming in unison. "Willow, I really didn't know that you're actually a natural airhead." 16 Knights crossed her arms and looked at Wuming jokingly. "Ahem, in short, Galji's group is locked up by me. I didn't have time to hand them over to White Yiksha. If you want to talk to the griffin, I can do it at any time." Everyone looked at Haruai Biao. Finally, Haruai Biao looked at Sanmao Cat in his arms and nodded. Nasolic's inherent barrier, 6th layer, forest. When Galji's group was locked up in Nasolic's inherent barrier by Wuming in the form of a gift competition, they were all separated. Galji was in the lava area of the 7th layer, Aurora was in the underground lake of the 4th layer, and the unconscious Ling was directly thrown into the wilderness of the 8th layer by Wuming. The seriously injured Glea was taken care of by Wuming and placed in the forest area of the 6th layer. And it turned out that the griffin could indeed settle down in the forest. Glea, who had woken up from his coma, was lying quietly on the ground at this moment to avoid physical exhaustion. Although it was very weak, Glea's injuries were indeed recovering. In short, it was better than nothing. "I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing," Glea muttered to himself. Glea, who had woken up from his serious injuries, saw the contract document in front of him at a glance and knew that he was trapped in a place that was not a forest. "I'm afraid it's some kind of personal space," Grove thought. After all, there were many people who had such a space in the box court world. Basically, it was used to hold gift competitions. At this moment, he was obviously trapped in the gift competition, so Grove guessed that this was Wuming's personal space. "I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing." Grove didn't know if His Highness and the others had escaped, or if they were captured like him. But right now, it was more important to recover from his injuries, so Glea simply lay down here peacefully. However, at this moment, there was a fluctuation in space, and two extremely obvious figures appeared not far away from Glea. Glea couldn't help but be vigilant. Chapter 884. Willow. Glea, whose eyesight was much better than humans, saw the two people walking towards them at a glance. The one in front was Wuming. Supporting his body that had not fully recovered but was almost able to fight, Glea stood up, and a fighting spirit emanated from him. Although Glea's wings had not recovered yet, he had enough time to rest, which allowed Glea to have the power to fight. "What, Glea, do you still want to fight me?" Wuming, who was walking in front, did not release his aura to intimidate Glea. Instead, he snapped his fingers lightly. In an instant, the ground where Glea was standing cracked slightly, and chains rushed out one after another, throwing all of them onto Glea's body and tightly entangling him. Glea, who did not react in time, instantly fell to the ground because his limbs were all tied up. "Damn it!" Glea raised his head and looked at Wuming rather unbearably. "Galji and the others are fine, I just locked them up. You should be honest, I don't want to do anything to you, but I will still hand you over to White Yiksha after this." Wuming walked in front of Glea and patted his griffin's head. "Up to you." Glea could not beat Wuming anyway, and he was now a prisoner, so what could he do? I came to see you this time because I have a companion who is quite interested in you. You can talk to her. Wuming said, and Haruai Hibaku walked past Wuming from behind and came to the front. Hello, Mr. Glaya Grove. The quiet girl holding the three-furred cat took the lead to greet him. Hello, little girl. Grove responded to Wuming. Let's not talk about Wuming first, at least the little girl in front of him looked pretty good. I'll leave first, Grove. If you're done talking, knock on the chain, and I'll come and pick you up. Wuming had no intention of listening in, so he left after instructing Haruai Hibaku. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded, then looked at Grove again. My name is Haruai Hibu. Do you know this? Haruai Hibu said as he took out the pendant hidden in his clothes. This. Could this be? After leaving the 6th floor, Wuming arrived at the 7th floor, which was Galji's floor. Sir Villo, what do you think? Galji, who was sitting on a rock that was colder than other places, immediately stood up when he saw Wuming. Wuming helped Galji find a rock that was not so hot. Galji did not need to keep the another cosmology on to prevent the heat. After all, if he accidentally glanced at Wuming when the another cosmology was half turned on, it would definitely be uncomfortable. I haven't done anything to those people yet. It'll take some time, but I'll deal with them in a way that won't put the blame on you or me. After Galji told Wuming everything he knew about the people behind him, Wuming did not immediately make a move on those existences. First of all, Galji had never really come into contact with the higher-ups. The people he came into contact with were people who were not at the highest level. At most, they were at a higher level than Galji. Even so, Wuming was very sure that some of the gods in the upper levels of the box court were behind this. However, because he did not know which gods were behind this, Wuming could only make a move on the people Galji knew. After finding these people, Wuming would slowly dig out the people behind these people. However, these people's whereabouts were always unpredictable. Wuming could not find them at the moment, but Wuming had a way. After returning to the root, Wuming could use the root's authority to find people in the box court. By then, they would not be able to escape. Oh. What is it? Galji was quite interested in the method Wuming had prepared. Not only could he deal with those people, but he could also do it without exposing his identity. However, Wuming had no reason to tell Galji that it would be the same even if Galji's attitude toward him became slightly more respectful. You don't need to know that. Then, Wuming snapped his fingers. A golden chain extended from Wuming's sleeve and bound Galji. It was the celestial lock. The celestial lock was infinitely long. It could still be used after binding Galji. Although Galji did not recognize the chain's true identity, he knew it was a divine spark weapon. Lord Villo. Galji did not resist, but he was a little puzzled by Wuming's actions. He was trapped in Wuming's game of gifts and could not break free. There was no need to use a divine spark weapon to tie him up. I'm going to hand you over to White Yiksha, so I need to do this. As Wuming spoke, he reached out and pierced Galji's body. He did not want to kill Galji. When Wuming stabbed Galji, a ripple appeared in front of him. Wuming only reached his hand in. Wuming found what he wanted without much searching. Then, Wuming fished out a slightly curled piece of parchment appeared in Wuming's hand. It was the contract scroll that Wuming used to force Galji into a gift match. Game name of gift, accumulated time contestants, Galji, Aurora, ringtone, Glaya Grove contestant victory condition 1, stay in the designated venue, unlimited, contestant victory condition 2, defeat the organizer contestant defeat condition, leave the designated venue contestant defeat punishment, repeat the game organizer victory condition, defeat the contestant organizer defeat condition, the contestant wins oath, respect the above content, based on the glory, flag, and organizers. Authority, host the gift game. Originate God, seal. That's right, it was such an unsolvable contract document. Not to mention the victory condition, the failure condition was obviously problematic. This obviously did not allow Galji to leave here, even if he had a way to leave, because the failure penalty was to repeat the game. In other words, if Galji and the others used their own way to leave the designated venue, which was Wu Ming's inherent enchantment, then they would fail, and the failure penalty would make them return here again. The only way was to defeat the organizer. However, after Wu Ming locked them here, he did not care about them anymore. Wu Ming only met Galji twice, and Wu Ming did not even see the others, let alone defeat them. And this was not against the rules. After all, there was no rule that the organizer could not leave the designated venue, so this unsolvable gift game essentially became a gift game that restricted the movements of Galji and the others. And now, Wu Ming wanted to destroy this gift game. Kaka. Wu Ming condensed a power that Galji did not recognize in his hand, and the soft parchment made the sound of a hard object shattering. Wu Ming was using the source power to destroy the gift game. As long as the gift game was destroyed, Galji and the others could be freed from the shackles of the gift game. As for why he did not pause it, after all, deleting and pausing were two different things. After Wu Ming handed Galji over to White Yiksha, he did not want to care about them anymore, so Wu Ming chose to destroy this gift game directly. Crack! With Wu Ming's continuous force, the entire parchment shattered. Chapter 885. Snap! Wu Ming snapped his fingers and two figures instantly appeared beside Galji. It was Aurora and Belle. Your Highness. Although Ling was unconscious when he caught her, it had been a long time since then and she had already woken up. You paused our game of grace. Aurora stood vaguely in front of Galji and looked at Wu Ming with vigilance. Sir Villo didn't pause the game. He directly destroyed the forced game of grace, Galji answered on behalf of Wu Ming. Although Aurora and Belle were shocked that Wu Ming could destroy the game of grace, they were more shocked by Galji's attitude toward Wu Ming. Your Highness. Aurora and Belle were puzzled by Galji's attitude. Why was he so respectful? Belle, Aurora, you must correct your attitude as a prisoner. Galji looked at the two of them and gestured for them to not act rashly. I made a deal with your Highness. I will help him deal with the enemy, and he will willingly be handed over to White Yiksha to be imprisoned. Waving the heaven lock in his hand, Wu Ming explained to the two of them. Although Aurora and Belle were a little surprised, it was not impossible to accept after thinking about it carefully. After all, if it was a deal of this level, His Highness would still be able to accept it. However, Wu Ming and Galji's deal wasn't like this. However, Wu Ming wouldn't let Galji off and Galji was aware of this, so he didn't expose Wu Ming's words. Besides, Galji didn't know if it was due to Wu Ming's influence, but he thought through a lot while meditating on the 7th floor. How could dragging out an ignoble existence compare to living honorably? Galji indeed had to pay the price for his previous actions. If not, wouldn't those who died indirectly because of him be wronged? He was a hero who appeared in the post-apocalyptic world, so he had to do something worthy of the name of Galji. And most importantly, Wu Ming would help him deal with the enemy. Therefore, even though he was about to be imprisoned, Galji felt that he had gained freedom. Freedom from being dominated by others. Sir Villo is right. We're about to go to jail. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Galji looked at the two of them apologetically. What are you talking about, Your Highness? Since you want to go to jail, we will definitely accompany you. Grabbing the trapped Galji, Ring shook her head. Aurora had the same idea. There was no need for apologies between them. The reason they had gathered together was because of Galji. Since Galji was going to jail, they would accompany him. Wu Ming was very clear about this, so he only bound Galji. After all, as long as Galji was still there, the others wouldn't leave him. It was precisely because he knew this that Galji said, "Sorry for implicating you," instead of, "You can leave." Of course, even if they wanted to leave, Wu Ming might not allow it. No, Wuming definitely wouldn't allow them to leave. Although Galji was the mastermind, Aurora and Ring Sins weren't small either, so they had to be punished. So, where's Glaya? Aurora looked at Wuming again. She and Ring had been summoned to Galji's side by Wuming using teleportation, but why wasn't Glaya there? One had to know that Glaya was seriously injured in order to block Wuming's weapon salvo. Could it be? Aurora and Ring suddenly felt sad. Both of them were guessing if Glaya had died from his serious injuries. However, only Galji looked indifferent because he knew very well that Glaya must be fine. Wuming wouldn't attack Glaya, and without external influence, a griffin's vitality was very tenacious. It wouldn't die so easily. Don't worry. It's just because a companion in my community is looking for Glaya for something. It's just that the discussion hasn't ended yet. Just wait a little. This made Aurora and Ring feel helpless. In this day and age, they still had to wait when they were sent to prison, but at this moment, the celestial lock binding Galji made a clanging sound. According to Wuming's request, as long as Haruhibu Yao and Glaya finished their discussion, they could knock on the heaven lock that bound Glaya and send a message to Wuming, asking him to pick her up. Although the interval was very short, there was no doubt that Haruhibu Yao had finished talking to Glaya. My companion has finished talking to Glaya. Wuming snapped his fingers again. In an instant, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, and everyone came to a forest. Your Highness. Glaya's surprised voice entered everyone's ears. Glaya and Galji were also bound by golden chains, and there was a girl beside them. The girl was Haruhibu Yao. Elder Glaya, are your injuries okay? Ring immediately ran to Glaya's side, looking rather worried. Then, Aurora and Galji followed. After all, Glaya was indeed seriously injured at that time. Except for the wings that have not recovered yet, the injuries on my body have mostly recovered. Glaya was right. At that time, he had his back facing Wuming's attack. Therefore, as a griffin, his wings had suffered the most serious injuries. It's good that you're fine. At this moment, Galji was also relieved. While Galji and the others were talking, Wuming also talked to Haruhibu Yao at this moment. How is it? Did you get anything you want to know? Haruhibu Yao thought for a moment and nodded, but then shook his head. This made Wuming a little dumbfounded. Are you not satisfied with the answer? Wuming guessed. Yes. This time, Haruhibu Yao nodded honestly. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to talk to Glaya. Haruhibu Yao showed a satisfied smile. It seemed that he had made friends with Glaya. Wuming, on the other hand, felt that Haruhi Hiroyuki was quite content. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to find clues when looking for something they want. Although Wuming didn't know what Haruhibu Yao was looking for, Haruhibu Yao should be satisfied to be able to find a clue. Do you need my help? Whatever Haruhibu Yao was looking for, Wuming would find it in an instant when he returned to the route. However, Haruhibu Yao refused. I can do it myself. Then, Haruhibu Yao's face showed a trace of unwillingness to admit defeat. As expected of a problem child. At this moment, Wuming could only smile helplessly. But it was also true that if it was something important to Haruhibu Yao, then it was better to let Haruhibu Yao do it alone. Then, Wuming looked at Galji and the others who were still chatting. It's almost time to go. It was time to go to jail. Chapter 886. North District, 54545 Outer Sect Ruins. At this moment, the magma lake had been artificially cooled. White Yiksha methodically issued one order after another, allowing the Alliance's community to begin the restoration of 54,545 Outer Sect. Because the time between Absolute Evil's appearance and its destruction was too short, there were no high-ranking powerhouses near 54545 Outer Sect. Even Vera had been abducted by Wuming, leaving White Yiksha alone. Therefore, the restoration of the North District's 5-digit outer sect 54545 outer sect fell to her. Seriously, I'm not the ruler of the North District. Why should I be the commander? White Yiksha kept complaining. In fact, the main reason was that no one came to help, which caused White Yiksha's dissatisfaction. After the rulers of the North District received the news that absolute evil had been destroyed, they did not even think of going to 54545 outer sect. When there was a powerful external enemy like absolute evil, perhaps they would unite, but once absolute evil was eliminated, they would fall back into a state of internal strife. Anyway, it was not their outer sect, so there was no need to care. Moreover, White Yiksha could not care about them if they did not come. After all, absolute evil had been destroyed, so it did not matter if they came or not. But she was definitely dissatisfied. Villo, that brat, really abducted Vera. Although Vera did not play much of a role in command, she was at least someone from the North District. Now that the North District's outer sect was being rebuilt, how could a ruler of the East District be in command? However, at this moment, White Yiksha happened to sense Wu Ming's presence. Why is that brat Villo here? Although White Yiksha complained and hoped that someone could replace her to command the reconstruction of 54,545 outer sect, she really did not expect Wu Ming to come back. Are you looking for me to talk about the Dragon of Origin? Or is there something else? White Yiksha guessed in her heart. Yo White Yiksha. Wu Ming greeted White Yiksha as he walked into the small command post that was temporarily set up. Where's Vera? Where have you abducted Vera? White Yiksha asked in annoyance. I sent Vera back to her community. Anyway, Vera can't do anything here, can she? As if it was his own home, Wu Ming sat down without hesitation, but because there were no chairs, Wu Ming could only find something to sit on. Then why did thou come back? What's the matter? White Yiksha didn't mind Wu Ming's behavior. He was used to it. I'm here to hand Galji and the others over to you. As Wu Ming spoke, he extended his hand and a translucent ball of light appeared in his hand. Galji, Belle, Aurora, and Gria could be vaguely seen in the ball of light. This is just a simple sealing boundary formed by Lune runes. You should be able to open it easily. As for why he treated Galji like this, the three of them and a griffin were indeed not small. It was really not good to hand them over to White Yiksha. This way, they were sealed in a ball of light and handed to White Yiksha. It was also convenient for White Yiksha to carry them around. Thou is thoughtful. White Yiksha took the ball of light that sealed Galji and the others. He took out the gift card and the ball of light disappeared with a wave of his hand. After I'm done with this, I'll lock them up in the East prison. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's mission was completed, but Wu Ming showed no signs of leaving. Is there anything else? I have to leave Hakata for a while. As if he was waiting for White Yiksha to say this, Wu Ming immediately answered after White Yiksha asked. It's not like thou hast never left before, White Yiksha complained. Or are thou preparing not to come back for a long time this time? White Yiksha hit the nail on the head. After all, my purpose in coming to Hakata was to find my body. Since my body has been found, I should go and deal with my enemy. This enemy, Wu Ming referred to Gidia. Even without the Black Origin mud, Gidia was already considered a tyrant in the Type Moon world. With the Black Origin mud, it could be said that Gidia had become even more terrifying. Wu Ming was not afraid of an enemy like Az Dakaha who only used the Black Origin mud as a weapon, but it was impossible for someone like Gidia to only use the Black Origin mud as a weapon. Simply put, it was the difference between a magician and a magician. Magicians only used magic as a weapon, but magicians would delve deeper into it. If Gaia were to delve deeper into the Black Origin mud and discover something that would allow her to completely master it, it would be very troublesome. Wu Ming had to take the initiative to attack Gidia before Gidia made a move. In that case, the reason thou came to find me is very clear. Without a doubt, Wuming wanted to ask White Yiksha about the dragon of origin before leaving. White Yiksha's expression became serious. With a light wave of her hand, the place where the two were changed. White Yiksha brought Wuming to a special space. In the distance was a large white snow mountain. Wuming and White Yiksha stood on a plain that resembled ice. A trace of light shuttled through the mountain range in the distance. In the distant horizon, one of the venues of White Yiksha's gift game. I don't know much about the dragon of origin. I can only provide you with some information. Putting away her usual playful expression, White Yiksha straightened her attitude and looked at Wuming. That's right. White Yiksha brought Wuming here to tell Wuming about the dragon of origin. That was a long time ago. It was so long ago that it was longer than my lifespan. As for why White Yiksha said that, it was because, when I first gained sentience, I accidentally saw the origin dragon. As if recalling the past, White Yiksha's aura became slightly in line with her age. That was at the end of the day. I didn't know how I discovered the other party. At the same time, the thought of "this is the dragon of origin" automatically appeared in my mind. Although the other party noticed me, it only glanced at me lightly. There was no emotion in its eyes. After that, it immediately left as though it was just passing by. Turning her head to look at Wuming, White Yiksha continued speaking. I didn't feel that feeling from thee, but judging from the appearance, thy body is exactly the same as the dragon of origin's body that I saw. It's just that the size is different, and there's another very important point. White Yiksha flew into the air and looked at Wuming. The dragon of origin I saw was much stronger than thee. Even at that time, I felt that I wasn't its match. One had to know that the original White Yiksha was not White Yiksha, but the White Knight Monarch. It was a powerful existence whose spirit lattice had not been shrunk. The dragon of origin that White Yiksha mentioned made the White Knight Monarch feel that he was not its match. Without a doubt, the other party must be an existence that exceeds a single digit. White Yiksha judged. By the way, White Yiksha, are there no single-digit existences in Hakata? Chapter 887. Wuming had been in Hakata for a while and had seen existences with 3 to 7 digits. Although White Yiksha had fallen from 2 digits to 4 digits because he had converted to Buddhism, Wuming had a rough understanding of the strength of 2 digits after fighting with Az Dakaha. After all, Az Dakaha, who had the black soil root, could no longer be in 3 digits. He had almost displayed the strength of 2 digits, but Az Dakaha's essence was still in 3 digits. However, Wuming had never heard of or seen the existence of a single digit. In the ancient books in No Name's underground library, Wuming had not found any content related to a single digit. Therefore, Wuming could not help but be curious about a single digit. Actually, from 3 digits onward, you can't divide them according to strength. You have to look at your own spirit lattice. Logically speaking, below 3 digits, you had to look at your spirit lattice to divide them. However, spirit lattice below 3 digits did not have an overwhelming effect on strength. Therefore, from 3 digits onward, you had to divide them according to strength. If your spirit lattice reached 2 digits, your strength would naturally be in 2 digits. Of course, there were those without spirit lattice. At that time, you could only look at your own strength. For example, 16 Knight's essence was human. In addition, there were no traces of spirit lattice on 16 Knight's body. Logically speaking, 16 Knights should be in the 7 digits. However, 16 Knights had an inhumanly strong physique. This allowed 16 Knights' strength to be in the 4 digits. Therefore, 16 Knights' strength was in the 4 digits. However, for an ordinary human to have the strength of 4 digits, 16 Knights' body probably had some hidden power that he had not figured out. In any case, that was what Wuming believed. After that, let's take a look at Az Dakaha. If a million gods surrounded Az-Dakaha and Az-Dakaha activated Avesta to copy the strength of the million gods into himself, Az-Dakaha's strength would instantly reach 2 digits. However, under normal circumstances, Az-Dakaha's spirit lattice would still be in the 3 digits. Therefore, Az-Dakaha's strength in Hakata was a 3-digit demon king who would not cower in the face of a 2-digit enemy. In short, not having a spirit lattice did not mean that one was weak. However, the stronger the spirit lattice, the stronger one was. As for the single digit you mentioned, there is none. With this foreshadowing, White Yiksha's answer to Wuming was much easier. None. Wuming was stunned. I can't say that there aren't any. 1-digit numbers do exist, but they're no longer creatures with self-awareness. They're things like laws. Since 1-digit numbers were something similar to laws, in that case, Hakata's strongest combat power is only in the 2 digits, right? Wuming deduced. You are not stupid. However, Hakata's 2-digit numbers are very rare. There are only 17 in total. As for the 2-digit level, do you know Shakyamuni? That bald donkey belongs to the 2-digit category. This made Wuming come to a realization. It turned out that there were only 17 2-digit numbers in Box Ting. It was indeed as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. However, if the founder of the world's 3 major religions like Shakyamuni had a 2-digit number, then the main gods of other myths and religions' founders would probably have a 3-digit number. After all, there were only 17 2-digit numbers. However, Hakata had 100 god groups. There were very few god groups that could have a 2-digit number. However, 3-digit god groups were almighty. Therefore, most of the main gods of the god groups should have a 3-digit number. Only a very small number of the main gods of the god groups should have a 4-digit number. Ordinary gods would have a 5-digit number. Therefore, Hakata had said that Absolute Evil's clone body had the strength of a god. After all, most of Absolute Evil's clone bodies had a 5-digit number. A 6-digit number was in existence with some ability. A 7-digit number was probably an ordinary person. That's why I've never heard of the existence of a single-digit number after being in Hakata for so long. This suspicious point had been resolved. No, if it were now, there would still be a single-digit number, White Yiksha said as he stared at Wuming. Are you referring to me? Wuming pointed at himself. I'm referring to you. White Yiksha smiled knowingly at Wuming. Didn't you reveal your true body when you destroyed Az-Dakaha? Although I don't know how you hid your spirit lattice, your body leaked a trace of the aura of a spirit lattice. Based on that aura, I can determine that even if I return the Godhead and retrieve the spirit lattice, I won't be your match. Furthermore, it will be an overwhelming victory. Without a doubt, you aren't on the same level as us. You are undoubtedly a single-digit number. The so-called spirit lattice referred to heritage and merit. Hyunryong's heritage was Hyunryong's, and the Villow's merit was the Villow's. Sawdrake was considered a figurehead. As the root dragon, Wuming didn't have any heritage or merit. Logically speaking, he didn't have a spirit lattice. Therefore, it wasn't that Wuming had hidden his spirit lattice, but that he really didn't have one. However, White Yiksha said that she had sensed it. As the root dragon, Wuming wasn't bound by the box court. Wuming guessed that his own status had replaced the spirit lattice, causing White Yiksha to make the wrong judgment. However, if one really only looked at Wuming's status, Wuming was indeed higher than any existence in the box court. At this moment, Wuming was an existence that was only one step away from entering the adult stage. Although he had not taken this crucial step, Wuming would definitely not be in the double digits now. After all, his hypostasis had been liberated to the maximum. In that case, he would definitely be in the single digits. However, you are much weaker than the root dragon I first encountered. Even so, I can determine that you aren't a 2-digit number, but an existence higher than that. As a former 2-digit number, White Yiksha's judgment was definitely correct. Although it was unbelievable, it was completely confirmed that Wuming was a one-digit number. After that, did you not see the root dragon again? Wuming asked again. The next time I saw you was you. Speaking of which, when I saw your true body previously, I couldn't recall it because it was too long ago. However, I kept feeling that it was déjà vu. Fortunately, I'm not that old. I still remember. White Yiksha opened her fan and waved it twice proudly. Then let's end it here. Since White Yiksha had nothing else to say, it was time to end it. No name, I will use my methods to take care of them in secret, but I still have to ask you to take care of them. Wuming's secret care was not as effective as White Yiksha's, the local snake's, care on the surface. You don't have to worry about this. Just based on the fact that you defeated absolute evil and No Name's performance during this period of time, No Name can be raised by a single digit to 6 digits. Furthermore, I'm prepared to give No Name the authority of a region ruler. The community's hierarchy was related to the entire community. It wasn't something that could be promoted just because one person made a significant contribution. However, 16 knights and the others had indeed contributed a lot to No Name during this period of time after coming to the box court. Just the matter of defeating absolute evil's avatar was enough. Their strength had also been recognized by the lower 6 or 7 digits. With Wuming's defeat of absolute evil as an opportunity, No Name would have no problem rising to 6 digits. As for the region ruler, there was no need to mention it. No Name was originally a region ruler, and now it had the strength. White Yiksha was just returning it to its rightful owner. Then I'll leave it to you. Chapter 888. After bidding farewell to White Yiksha, Wuming returned to No Name in the East District. After all, even if he wanted to leave, he had to at least let his companions know. What was rare was that Wuming did not directly use the teleportation gate to enter No Name. Instead, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at a place that was still some distance away from No Name. Wuming was prepared to walk into No Name on foot, treating it as an experience. After all, I don't know when I'll be back again. Wuming finished speaking and walked towards No Name. The first thing that entered Wuming's eyes were naturally the 2 stone giants guarding the door. Then, Pest appeared in front of Wuming's eyes. Pest. Pest stood at the door, as if he had guessed that Wuming would go through the main entrance and quietly waited for him. Master, Senior Letitia asked me to wait for you here. Pest called out with some reluctance and even bowed. However, due to Wuming's abuse of power, Pest did not dare to be rude. He had always listened to Wuming and the others in No Name. As expected, he guessed it in the end. Wuming revealed a half-helpless and half-happy smile. He was helpless that his actions had been guessed. It was really contradictory that his companions could guess his actions. Let's go, Pest. Wuming did not say anything else. Since that was the case, the others in No Name probably knew that Wuming was preparing to leave. After all, Wuming had come to the box court to find his body. Since he had already found it, there was no need for Wuming to continue staying. Master, are you leaving? Although Wuming knew that Pest definitely knew about this, Pest's bluntness still surprised Wuming. That's right. Speaking of which, who guessed that I was leaving first? Wuming also asked without mincing his words. 16 knights in reverse. Pest had no intention of hiding anything and went straight to the point. It had to be said that the 2 of them were indeed a master-servant duo. They were really straightforward. Upon hearing Pest's reply, Wuming thought to himself, as expected. In the current No Name, other than Wuming, only 16 knights had such a brain. However, Wuming knew that he was going to leave soon, so he didn't care about this. Forget it, I'll do as you wish today. After that, Pest didn't say anything. He just obediently led the way for Wuming. Speaking of which, did they hold a banquet? It doesn't look like he's in the house, and he even asked you to lead the way. It was obvious that Pest wasn't leading Wu Ming in the direction of the house. Instead, the two of them were circling around No Name's house. It looked like they were heading towards the back of the house. Yes, Senior Letitia and the others have prepared a banquet for Master. Firstly, it's to celebrate Master defeating absolute evil. Secondly, it's to bid Master farewell. Wu Ming nodded silently. If that was the case, the entire No Name would be present. It was no wonder that it wasn't in the house. After all, even if No Name didn't have many members, there were still more than 100 of them. Most importantly, most of them were children. Compared to holding a banquet in the house, it was more comfortable to hold it in the open air. It could be said that they were considerate of the children. Wu Ming turned his gaze and saw Pest's frail, childlike figure. Although Pest was the Demon King, he was only pushed to the front by the 80 million wraiths who died from the Black Death as their representative and sat on the Demon King's throne. To be honest, Pest was just a child. Pest, have you mastered 4-digit strength recently? Wu Ming's tone was like an elder caring for a junior. Hearing Wu Ming's words, Pest froze for a moment and his footsteps slowed. But shortly after, Pest regained his composure and continued walking forward. Are you wondering why I care about you? Wu Ming, who saw through Pest's thoughts, asked again. Yes. Pest, who was walking in front of Wu Ming, nodded and replied softly. Thinking about it, it's not strange at all. You're my servant, so of course I care about you. Little did he know that Wu Ming's words could easily cause misunderstandings. Although Pest wouldn't misunderstand, these words were still jarring to Pest's ears. Pest stopped in his tracks and spoke with a heavy tone. But I'm only a slave of the master of No Name. Pest didn't care about Wu Ming's identity and began to throw caution to the wind. After all, she was the Demon King who was defeated by Wu Ming. She was a defeated Demon King who belonged to No Name. To be honest, although there was a saying that a defeated Demon King would be included in the community of the person who defeated them, this rule wasn't mandatory. If the community didn't need it, they could reject it. From Pest's point of view, the reason she was included in No Name was because No Name currently lacked combat power. If that wasn't the case, what awaited Pest would be death. Now that the community lacked manpower, Pest was included, so she was no different from a slave of No Name. Previously, when Wu Ming was talking about his experiences in the Northern District in the chat room, although Pest was present, she didn't speak. She only listened quietly as if she didn't have the right to speak. In the end, it was because of this reason. However, this was Pest's personal opinion. In fact, no one in No Name thought of Pest as a slave. Not even the slightest bit. Since she was part of the community, everyone was a family. Back then, Letitia joined No Name because she was defeated by the main force of the previous generation of No Name. Now, Letitia was completely integrated into No Name. She didn't look like a slave at all. Instead, Black Rabbit treated her intimately and even called Letitia Senior. First of all, we don't mean to treat you as a slave. That's just what you think. Wu Ming used his status as Pest's master to walk to Pest's side and rub Pest's little head with his large hand, as if telling Pest not to think too much. No one in No Name has ever ordered you around, right? And I didn't give you any unreasonable orders. Moreover, Wu Ming didn't give Pest many orders. Ever since he summoned Pest, Wu Ming had been running around outside and didn't see Pest much. You have to work hard to communicate with the others in the community, Pest. However, Pest didn't seem to care. I don't think I can communicate with the people of the community who killed my companions and enslaved me. That was true, but Pest was still a child. In this regard, Wu Ming could only sigh silently. Then, Wu Ming quietly reached his hand into the golden ripples that had opened up at some point and searched for something. Then, Wu Ming placed the item in front of Pest. Here. Chapter 889. What appeared in front of Pester was a bunch of cotton candy. Pester was stunned when she saw the cotton candy. This reminded her of the first time she met Wu-Ming. At that time, Wu-Ming had also bought cotton candy for her. She had to admit that the cotton candy was quite sweet. Let's not talk about how you are with the others for now. We have to get closer to each other. This cotton candy was bought by Wu-Ming the last time. It was kept fresh by magic, so it had been left in Wu-Ming's space. However, Pester didn't take it and turned her head to the side. Also, about your companions, if you use the method I used to summon you, they will definitely respond. However, when Wu-Ming finished speaking, Pester was clearly stunned. You need a holy relic, right? I don't have their holy relic, Pester said in a fit of pique. La Ting's case wasn't too bad. The flute she used was left behind, but it had been confiscated by White Yiksha. It was difficult to find it back. As for Wei Shi, he really didn't leave anything behind after disappearing. You should have seen how powerful your master is, right? Even without the holy relic, I can still find them. This is the agreement between you and your master. Trust me. To put it simply, Wu-Ming was prepared to use the Great Origin to continue cheating. As someone who had seen Wu-Ming's main body the moment they formed the contract, Pester naturally understood that Wu-Ming was special. Since it was a promise made by such a person, it definitely wouldn't be a lie. However, Pester still seemed to be a little hesitant. She moved her small hand and wanted to grab the cotton candy in front of her, but she couldn't make up her mind. Take it. Wu-Ming grabbed Pester's hand and placed the cotton candy stick in her hand. If you need anything in the future, just tell your master. I'm your master. Although Pest was summoned as an avenger, it didn't mean that he had revenge in his heart. It was just that the avenger job was most suitable for him. After Wu-Ming finished speaking, he didn't care about Pest's reaction. He held Pest's hand, which was still holding the cotton candy, and headed towards their destination. At this moment, Pest felt his heart warming up a little. Pester raised his head slightly and looked at Wu-Ming. He started to think that his master wasn't that bad after all. One more thing. You have to build a good relationship with the other members of the community. Don't keep a straight face all the time, got it? Wu-Ming was like a long-winded father, constantly reminding Pest. But Pest couldn't refute that. I got it. The favorability points that he had just added dropped instantly. Before this, Pest was ready to go all out. Even if Pester angered Wu-Ming with her words and Wu-Ming wanted to kill her, it didn't matter. But now, her words were restricted. In addition, Wu-Ming was Pest's master. In short, Pest couldn't raise his head in front of Wu-Ming now. However, when Wu-Ming saw Pest's helpless expression, Wu-Ming also felt helpless. Forget it. Let's take it slow. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day. He didn't want to force Pest. As long as there was change, it didn't matter if it took a long time. However, just as Wu-Ming and Pest were chatting, the two had already arrived at their destination. As everyone knew, as the largest community in the Lower East District, No Name's land was very vast. Behind No Name's castle-shaped building, there was a large open space. No one knew what it was for, but it was very spacious. At this moment, dozens of tables were placed on the originally spacious ground. The tables were covered with a not-so-fancy tablecloth. Plates of different shapes and sizes were placed on the tablecloth, and on the plates were various delicacies from the box court world. Did you rob someone? Wu-Ming couldn't help but shout when he saw this scene. After all, there were so many sumptuous delicacies. Whether it was the appearance, color, or even the aroma that Wu-Ming smelled, it all represented the value of these delicacies. How could it be a robbery, Mr. Villo? Everyone bought these from a high-class restaurant together. Black Rabbit's very recognizable voice came from behind Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming turned his head. More than 100 people stood not far behind Wu Ming. Without a doubt, after seeing Wu Ming arrive, they secretly came out from the nearby building. Although Wu Ming used his psychic ability to detect them, he had to pretend that he didn't know. Among the community members, most of the children were lined up like bushes. Compared to these children, Black Rabbit, 16 Knights, and the others clearly had the advantage of height. Even Letitia in her lowly form was half a head taller than these children. Perhaps, only Ren and Pest were as tall as these children of the community. Oh, Pest is actually holding hands with the Villo. Jiuyu and Osaka looked at Pest, who was holding hands with Wu Ming, as if he didn't care about the situation. There's a situation. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the three-furred cat, said simply, but the gossipy look in his eyes proved that this guy and Jiuyu and Osaka were both problematic children. Hearing this, Pest also reacted. He immediately shook off Wu Ming's hand and shrunk to the side. I think the two of you have nothing better to do. Wu Ming looked at Jiuyu and Osaka and Haruai Hiroyuki as if he had already given up. The heavens took pity on him. He really didn't have any messy thoughts about Pest, but being ridiculed by others really made Wu Ming a little unhappy. Wu Ming stopped looking at Jiuyu and Osaka and Haruai Hiroyuki and looked at Ren and Black Rabbit. Since I'm already here, don't let the children stand there like idiots. Hurry up and eat. After all, they were supposed to celebrate and send off Wu Ming, so they had to let Wu Ming speak first. Otherwise, they would have already started eating. They didn't need to wait for Wu Ming. Wu Ming's sharp eyes noticed that many children were salivating. They hadn't eaten such good food in the past 3 years. It was the same even 3 years ago. After all, 3 years ago, most of their teeth weren't fully grown yet. Naturally, they couldn't eat such delicious food. More importantly, 3 years ago, some of the children didn't even know how to walk yet. In short, they were basking in Wu Ming's glory today. Alright, everyone. Since Mr. Villo is here, let's start the banquet. Oh, oh, oh. The cheers of the children seemed to break through the sky. This made Wu Ming feel a little deafened. Sure enough, the children were hot-blooded and their voices were loud. Under Black Rabbit's encouragement and lead, the children, including Ren, happily ran to the front of the tables and began the long-awaited journey of delicious food. Chapter 890. Even Pest was squeezed to the edge of the table by the crowd of over 100 children. However, Pest, who had never faced such a situation before, was instantly at a loss. He glanced at Wu Ming from time to time, trying to seek help from Wu Ming. However, only Wu Ming's lips responded to Pest, "Eat as much as you can." If it was said that some of the children in No Name had enjoyed such delicacies before, then Pest was the only one who had never seen such a sumptuous meal in front of him. After all, Pest couldn't even fill his stomach when he came to the box court. After coming to the box court, Pest, who was bent on revenge, had never enjoyed such delicacies before. The considerate Wu Ming naturally wouldn't stop Pest from enjoying the delicacies. Pest looked at Wu Ming resentfully and was still hesitating. But soon, Pest was surrounded by Lily and a few other warm-hearted children. He half-willingly and half-forced to enjoy the delicacies with them. As expected, they are a bunch of children. Wu Ming looked at this heartwarming scene and was in a rather good mood. Although it's a banquet held with the excuse of celebrating you, that's just a passing remark. It's actually just to let the children of the community enjoy a rare celebration. 16 Knights walked to Wu Ming's side and crossed his arms behind his head. He looked at the children of the community eating heartily with a smile on his face. I don't know when our Lord 16 Knights has become so arrogant. Wu Ming crossed his arms and looked at 16 Knights with the same gaze that Juyu Asudara and Kasuga Yayoi used to look at Wu Ming and Pest, mocking him. Oh, you want to play games with me? I'm very confident. 16 Knights' eyes flashed as he looked directly at Wu Ming. I don't want to play games with you. Wu Ming spread his arms and looked like he was surrendering. What a joke. Who could beat a problem child when it came to talking? Wu Ming would not ask for a snub. By the way, when did you start preparing? Wu Ming was naturally referring to the banquet in front of him. The dozens of tables of delicacies in front of him must have taken a lot of effort. Even if he counted from the time Wu Ming left to find White Yiksha, time was rather tight. Letitia, who did not participate in the banquet and was standing behind Wu Ming, suddenly spoke up. Master, actually, everyone has been planning this banquet to celebrate the community's continuous progress. It's just that you didn't know about it. Because they had already started preparing, the members of No Name were able to prepare these delicacies in such a short period of time. At the same time, it was precisely because 16th Night had already started preparing for it that celebrating and sending off Wu Ming was really just a matter of convenience. In other words, 16th Night wasn't lying. Ahem. Indeed, we should hold a banquet like this. Wu Ming ignored 16th Night's teasing gaze as he coughed. Since the community had begun to develop steadily, they could not always lead a hard life. How could it be that they were eating chaff when they had a house full of gold? Of course, no matter what, it had to be done in moderation. By the way, since it's a banquet, Letitia, there's no need for you to be my maid anymore. Join the banquet with Black Rabbit and the others. Look, aren't they greeting you? Wu Ming was not wrong. Black Rabbit, Lily, Ren, and many other children of the community, as well as Jo Yuasuke and Kasuga Hikari, who had already joined the banquet, were all greeting them from time to time. I'm afraid they're calling for you, Master. Letitia playfully retorted. Letitia's words were not without reason. They might actually be calling for Wu Ming and the other two who had not yet joined the banquet. At that moment, Wu Ming could only smile and shake his head helplessly. Let's go. Although you're just a matter of convenience, we're still here to celebrate and send you off. After 16th Night finished speaking, she ignored Wu Ming and went straight to the banquet. I really don't know what to do with you guys. After all, Wu Ming had already said that he would follow the wishes of everyone in the community. If that was the case, then it was better to comply. Not sure if it was the universe or some other special space that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were large transparent yet opaque balls arranged in a regular pattern. A meteor was moving forward at a speed that normal people would not be able to see. It seemed as if there was no end to it. This was the gap between the worlds, a special space that had no end. Between the worlds. And that meteor was Wu Ming, who had left the box garden world. After happily attending the banquet, Wu Ming interacted with his no-name companions for a while, gave Letitia and Pest some instructions, and chatted with 16 Nights Reversal for a while. After that, Wu Ming left in an extremely natural manner, as though he was going out. There were no excessive goodbyes, no complicated words. It was really as if he was going out for a normal trip. At most, it could be considered as a long trip. Wu Ming left just like that. The main force of No Name understood that Wu Ming's long trip this time was not simple. However, no one directly said it out loud. Instead, they treated it as normal. They did not think that Wu Ming would really not return. They all believed in Wu Ming and believed that he would definitely return soon. Just like what Wu Ming had said to White Yiksha and Vera previously, it was fine as long as they trusted Wu Ming. There was no need to care about anything else. And 16th Night, Black Rabbit, and the others did the same. As for why, perhaps, this was what they meant by companions. Wu Ming collected his scattered thoughts, shook his head, and suppressed these thoughts. He then increased his flying speed. Because Wu Ming's body had spent a long time in the box garden world, his entire dragon body had been greatly strengthened. Therefore, even if he did not deliberately activate his phoenix transformation and only revealed his original body, it was already easy for him to reach this speed. At this moment, Wu Ming was preparing to use his body to fly through the gap between the worlds to return to the route. Because Wu Ming's backup machine was guarding the route, the entire route was hidden. Even the entrance was not the one that Wu Ming had seen before. Apart from using a special method to enter, or Wu-Ming removing the root's concealment, there was no other way to enter the root. However, Wu-Ming's backup machine inside the root was like a lighthouse that guided Wu-Ming through the fog at night. Wu-Ming only needed to rely on his senses to constantly move forward, and he would be able to reach the root. For example, Wu-Ming did not know what was going on. All he saw was the scenery around him blurring, and Wu-Ming had returned to the root. Chapter 891. It felt as though he had fallen into an environment, but Wu-Ming knew that it was just a special way for Wu-Ming to enter the root through his backup machine. The root was still the same universe, and there were not many changes. On the platform at the center of the root, a white dragon that was smaller than Wu-Ming's curled up body and spread its wings. It lay there quietly as though it was asleep, but at the same time, it looked like it had lost its life. In short, it was quite contradictory. That was Wu-Ming's backup machine. It wasn't wrong to say that it was alive, but it wasn't wrong to say that it wasn't alive either. If you really had to name it, it was a mechanical life form mixed with magic. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Wu-Ming flew to the platform naturally. The small platform automatically expanded a little after Wu-Ming flew over, just enough to accommodate Wu-Ming and his backup machine. Even so, the space around them did not change at all, as though it was infinite space. That was not wrong. After all, this was the root, and there was no concept of size in the space inside. Not to mention space, there was not even the concept of time. It was just like the root of the M-shaped moon, where everything was chaotic. The root was essentially the same. Apart from Wu-Ming and the root black mud, which was born from the root, no one could walk out of the root alive after entering. After landing on the platform, Wu-Ming had no intention of putting away his backup machine. He continued to let the backup machine act as the host and take control of the root. After all, Wu-Ming would have to leave again soon. Although it doesn't feel real, I've become a lot stronger. Looking at the backup machine next to him, Wu-Ming could feel that his body had indeed grown a lot in size at such a close distance. Compared to the backup machine in the root, Wu-Ming was now many times bigger. Wu-Ming even felt like the backup machine beside him was a figurine. Although Wu-Ming's body could freely expand or shrink, the size of his body in the realm of worlds was something that Wu-Ming subconsciously controlled. In other words, Wu-Ming's current size was what Wu-Ming subconsciously thought was appropriate. This meant that Wu-Ming's strength had also increased by leaps and bounds. After confirming the increase in his strength once again, Wu-Ming made up his mind. It was time to find trouble with Gideon. But before that, Wu-Ming had to act on the promise he made in the box world. He had to help Pest summon Wesley and Latine, punish the person behind Galji's words, and finally, and most importantly, the problem of absolute evil in the box world. However, Wu-Ming didn't intend to let himself handle these matters. Wu-Ming was going to let Collis help Wu-Ming with these matters. It wasn't that Wu-Ming was lazy. Collis could totally do it, and the results might be several times better than Wu-Ming's. Collis's brain alone was hundreds of millions of times faster than a human computer. In addition, Collis was a product of the mysterious realm, so her efficiency was many times higher than Wu-Ming's. She could do these things with half the effort. That was why Wu-Ming had the idea of letting Collis do it for him. When Collis and Wu-Ming's bodies were lost in the box world, Wu-Ming was troubled by certain things. Now, he had finally found Collis. If everything was left to Collis, what would Wu-Ming do? Wu-Ming was naturally going to make a trip to the seventh singularity. As early as when Wu-Ming obtained his dependent avatar, he could already multitask. In other words, even if his consciousness stayed in the root, he could still control the spirit base avatar to go to the singularity in real time. It was just that Wu-Ming didn't like to do it. Wu-Ming felt that it was a little perfunctory. If he got used to it, he was afraid that the future Wu-Ming would become a central processing machine. Although it would not cause schizophrenia, Wu-Ming still liked to put all his consciousness into the spirit base avatar and use it to encounter anything in the singularity. Such words made Wu Ming feel like he was more like a human than the mysterious and noble, origin, dragon. Taking a step back, Wu Ming had already left the trivial things to Collis to prepare. If he stayed in the root, he would have nothing to do. So, he might as well put all his attention into the spirit base avatar and seriously deal with everything that he encountered. I suffered a big loss at Gorgon's hands. How can I not get back at him? After temporarily taking over control of the standby machine, Wu Ming lay on the platform. Some of the necessary details still had to be handled by Wu Ming himself. After that, he could leave it to Collis. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. According to Wu Ming's speculation, Tachika and the others should have reached the last singularity by now. Just in time. I can solve the problem of absolute evil while I'm at it. He decided to solve the problem of the singularity as soon as possible, and then go on a crusade against Gideon with Tachika and the others. Wu Ming stretched out his dragon claw and tapped the empty space in front of him. A naked spirit base avatar appeared in front of Wu Ming, and the face was exactly the face of Wu Ming's human form. Then, Wu Ming spoke to Enkidu and Collis. Enkidu, Collis, I'm counting on you. Wu Ming meant for Enkidu and Collis to accompany Wu Ming's spirit base to the singularity in the form of avatars. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the golden heaven lock wrapped around Wu Ming's dragon claw arrived in front of Wu Ming's spirit base like a swimming dragon, causing a series of clanking sounds. The wedge at the tip of the heaven lock gently tapped Wu Ming's spirit base. In an instant, a silver-white chain appeared on Wu Ming's body. Not only that, but the silver-white chain also had a hint of gold, which made it look quite extraordinary. From this, it could be seen that Enkidu had already connected his avatar to Wu Ming's spirit base. Next was Collis's turn. Hum. A buzzing sound that sounded like an auditory hallucination appeared inside the great source. However, this wasn't an auditory hallucination, but rather the sound of Collis's movements. Wu Ming even felt his head vibrating slightly. Instantly, an invisible and mysterious signal like an electric wave was emitted from the dragon horn headpiece on Wu Ming's head. In the next second, a headpiece that looked like a dragon horn crown appeared on Wu Ming's avatar's head, shining with a light that seemed to be full of wisdom. At this moment, Collis had also completed the connection with Wu Ming's spirit base. Next, it's absolute evil. Chapter 892. With that, Wu Ming waved his hand, and Az Dakaha's three-headed dragon body appeared in the center of Wu Ming's dragon claw. Wu Ming tapped Az Dakaha's body lightly, and for some unknown reason, Az Dakaha's body instantly disintegrated into mysterious particles, and all of them were absorbed into the newly created spirit base by Wu Ming. In that case, Collis, you must complete the absolute evil problem first. After all, if he did not complete the absolute evil problem first, this spirit base would not be able to be used in the singularity. Yes, Master. The dragon horn on Wu Ming's head responded. Then, Wu Ming gave Collis the authority. After everything was ready, Wu Ming tapped his spirit base lightly. Go. A summoning magic circle appeared under the spirit base's feet, and in an instant, Wu Ming's spirit base disappeared. Collis, Enkidu, I'll leave it to you. Wu Ming finished and fell into a deep sleep. The moment Wu Ming fell into a deep sleep, the golden chains wrapped around Wu Ming's dragon claw rattled, and as if they were endless, they danced around the entire route, as if they were protecting Wu Ming, who was at the center of the platform. At the same time, the dragon horn on Wu Ming's head also glowed, as if it was using Wu Ming's authority to do something. Soon after, the entire route fell into darkness once more. Only the golden chains that covered the route and Wu Ming's dragon horn headdress shone, both of them fulfilling their duty to the fullest. In the northern fir forest, in an inconspicuous bush, a magic array suddenly appeared and glowed brightly. The light of the magic circle disappeared, and the magic circle lost its form, but a figure appeared in the bush. How did I end up here? Wu Ming walked out of the bush, took off the grass and other things on his body, and used magic to transform into a set of Europe clothes. Wu Ming began to complain. By the way, this should be Gorgon's territory, right? How did I end up here? When Wu Ming inserted the spirit base into the Mesopotamia singularity, he clearly aimed in the direction of the Uruk, and Wu Ming thought that no matter what, he could at least get closer to the Uruk. But instead of getting close to the Uruk, he ended up near the enemy's base. Although Gorgon said that she would not come out of her temple before she recovered, if Wu Ming, who once heavily injured her, appeared in front of Gorgon's gate again, she might not be able to resist the urge to come out and beat him. In any case, I should leave this place first. As for the idea of taking advantage of this opportunity to kill Gorgon, Wu Ming had considered it before, but the real enemy was probably not Gorgon. Wu Ming thought of the dream he had the night when he left the Quetzalcoatl's territory. At that time, Wu Ming only sensed that there was a stronger enemy behind all this, and according to his discussion with Gilgamesh and Merlin, that existence was probably the real Tiamat. He did not know what effect eliminating Gorgon would have on Tiamat. If it could weaken Tiamat, it would be best, but if Gorgon's death caused Tiamat to appear in person, it would be really bad. Kalas hadn't dealt with the absolute evil issue yet, and Wu Ming's current spiritual base was temporarily no match for Tiamat, so he had to wait for a while. Then, according to his own judgment, Wu Ming began to move in the direction of the Uruk. In order to avoid encountering magical beasts that might exist in the fir forest, Wu Ming did not choose to directly pass through the fir forest. Instead, he chose to detour to the highlands in the southwest, preparing to return to the Uruk from there. Even if it was a magical beast, it was impossible to run to such a desolate place. That was why Wu Ming chose this place. Standing on a bare mountainous platform, Wu Ming couldn't help but complain. If the magical beasts can detour from the mountainous area, perhaps the Uruk will be doomed. But that was impossible. Gorgon alone couldn't produce a large number of magical beasts with the ability to fly or travel in the highlands. Besides, if it could, perhaps Gorgon would have done so long ago and there would be no need for it to fight to the death with the humans on the magical beast's front. Could it be that Gorgon was waiting for something? In Wu Ming's opinion, this was too unrealistic. And as a non-human servant, Wu Ming naturally heard it clearly. Snore. As the growl got closer, Wu Ming scanned his surroundings. Wu Ming was standing on a small platform, but even if it was a platform, it was still a highland. Therefore, if there were creatures walking from a low place to a high place, Wu Ming wouldn't be able to see those creatures with his eyes because of the wide platform. And if those creatures spread to surround them, not to mention ordinary people, even the slightly weaker servants could only wait for death. That's right, Wu Ming was surrounded. Wu Ming's mental power clearly transmitted the images of the creatures that were constantly spreading to Wu Ming's mind. They were some red-haired magical beasts that were more than 2 meters tall and looked like hyenas. Yilidim, Silent's eyes shone with a bright light. The last time he came to this singularity, Wu Ming saw a magical beast called Yilidim produced by Gorgon, but they seemed to be a lot bigger than the last time I saw them. As mentioned before, these Yilidim were more than 2 meters tall. Roughly speaking, they were more than 2.5 meters tall, close to 3 meters tall. The Yilidim that Wu Ming saw last time weren't that big, at most, they were more than 2 meters tall. As a result, these Yilidim that appeared in front of Wu Ming were close to 3 meters tall. I'm afraid that Gorgon is really focused on healing his injuries. Otherwise, how could there be so many Yilidim? At present, only Gorgon didn't go out to heal his injuries and focused on producing enhanced magical beasts could explain why these Yilidim were so big. Are they treating me as prey? Wu Ming couldn't help but scratch his head. They should be able to realize that Wu Ming wasn't a human, or they couldn't see the difference in strength between the two sides. It was fine if they couldn't feel the difference in strength, but Wu Ming was emitting a very dangerous aura at the moment. Magical beasts were also beasts, and their perception of danger wasn't as slow as humans. But even if they felt Wu Ming's powerful aura, the Yilidim were still quite bold and bravely surrounded Wu Ming. It seems that there is a leader behind the command. It was precisely because of the existence of a leader that these Yulidim didn't retreat because of Wu Ming's aura. After all, hyenas relied on numbers to compete with leopards and lions for food. Chapter 893. Unfortunately, at this moment, Wu Ming was neither an ordinary person nor a weak servant. He was a divine servant with an extremely powerful spirit base index. It could only be said that the leader of Yulidim had found the wrong prey. Wu Ming would treat them as prey instead. While Wu Ming was thinking, all the Yulidim climbed up the platform and completely surrounded Wu Ming. However, these Yulidim did not launch an attack. They just surrounded Wu Ming as if waiting for something. Then, the earth began to tremble. Boom! 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 A behemoth walked up from the mountainous platform. It was a red-haired, golden-haired kobold with a rag around its waist. Because it walked upright, it was much taller than the other Yulidim, and its body was full of muscles. Compared to Wu Ming, it was like a small giant. Its head was the same as the head of the Yulidim, but this kobold's eyes were blood red. There were no whites or eyeballs. They were completely blood red, just like a berserker who had gone berserk from all the killing. The key point was that this kobold exuded a much stronger aura than the other Yulidim. It seemed that this kobold was the leader of these Yulidim. Roar! The kobold roared at Wu Ming as if it was saying something, but ordinary people could not understand the language of the demonic beasts. However, Wu Ming unexpectedly understood. The kobold's general idea was more or less like this: I am Yulidim, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. I am also a son of the mother goddess. Why do you betray the mother goddess, Lachum? This made Wu Ming confused. How did he become Lachum? Although Wu Ming did not know why the kobold called him Lachum, he understood one thing. The kobold walking upright in front of him was different from other mass-produced demonic beasts. It was probably the real Yulidim of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The original Yulidim alone was far more intimidating than the mass-produced Yulidim. If this Yulidim was converted into a servant, it was probably a god-level servant, and a very strong one. There were also levels in the god level. Take Absolute Evil's avatar for example. Absolute Evil's two-headed dragon avatar was mostly a 5-digit number, which was a god-level disaster. But first of all, anything above 5 digits was a god level. And if the Yulidim in front of Wu Ming was a god-level servant, it was at least a top-level god-level servant. Legend has it that the god Kingu led the 11 sons of Tiamat to fight against the Sumer gods. Although the result was a defeat, the fact that the 11 sons of Tiamat could fight against the Sumer gods was enough to show the strength of the 11 sons of Tiamat. If such an existence interfered with the demonic beasts in the north wall, even if there were many servants on the front line, it would be quite difficult to resist. Not to mention that this guy seemed to be quite smart. As for why? Just based on Wu Ming's encounter with Yulidim in this mountainous region. Wu Ming wanted to bypass the demonic beasts in the north wall through the southwest mountains and return to Uruk. And these Yulidim happened to ambush Wu Ming. Obviously, these Yulidim came here in advance. In that case, could Wu Ming think that these Yulidim were also preparing to bypass the demonic beasts and attack the Uruk? If it was really an irrational demonic beast, it wouldn't choose to go through the mountains. Only in the presence of this Yulidim leader would these Yulidim follow the leader into the mountains. Perhaps it accidentally found Wu Ming coming out of the fir forest, so the kobold Yulidim chose to ambush him. I don't care what Lachum you are. You just want to hunt me. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the kobold Yulidim showed a human-like smile, as if admitting that Wu Ming was right. What a coincidence. I also want to hunt you, Honorable the 11 Sons. Wu Ming said. The distorted golden 7-headed snake staff emerged from the ripples beside him and fell into Wu Ming's palm. Wu Ming's spirit base was rider, but that didn't stop Wu Ming from acting as a caster. Roar! The original Yulidim roared. Along with Yulidim's roar, the other mass-produced Yulidim rushed toward Wu Ming. At that moment, it was as if a sea of red and yellow was about to devour Wu Ming. Wu Ming didn't panic. He tapped the seven-headed snake staff on the ground gently, and letter-like special runes covered the ground, which were trampled by the charging Yulidim. Crack! With a crack, the Yulidim closest to Wu Ming was instantly frozen. Although the ice was very thick, the frozen Yulidim could be seen clearly. For example, the frozen Yulidim closest to Wu Ming still had a ferocious expression on its face. It was simply lifelike. Whether it was the rippling hair due to running and jumping in the ice, or the unknown shredded flesh between its teeth, Wu Ming saw it all. Feeling the chill of the ice, some of the unfrozen Yulidim in the rear felt a little afraid and took 2 steps back. But because of the original Yulidim, they didn't dare to run away directly. Even if the minions are strengthened, they are still minions. Silent Wonder tapped the ground with his 7-headed snake staff once more, shattering the ice that sealed Yulidim. Yulidim and the rest of the ice turned into fine powder and scattered on the ground. The ground was covered in a layer of white, without a single trace of blood to be seen. This made the mass-produced Yulidim even more terrified. Some of them even turned around and ran away in fear. But in the next second, these mass-produced Yulidim were smashed into pieces by several other Yulidim that flew out of nowhere. Disgusting purplish-black blood splattered all over the ground, and indistinguishable broken limbs and flesh splattered everywhere. The remaining nerves made some of the flesh move twice, but it soon returned to normal. How cruel! Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at the kobold Yulidim who had retracted its hand. He clearly saw that the kobold had casually grabbed a few Yulidim around it and threw them at the fleeing Yulidim. It seemed that the kobold didn't treat these mass-produced Yulidim as its own kind, but as tools instead. Roar! The kobold Yulidim roared a few more times, as if reprimanding these Yulidim for being useless. When the remaining Yulidim heard their leader's words, they slowly retreated from the platform. In an instant, only Wu Ming and the kobold were left on the platform. Chapter 894. Does this mean you want to duel me? Wu Ming saw through Yulidim's intentions. It wasn't hard to understand. After all, even if the mass-produced Yulidim rushed forward, it would be useless. As expected of the 11 sons of Tiamat. This guy isn't simple. He has some brains. Wu Ming thought to himself. Moreover, since he still chose to duel Wu Ming after seeing Wu Ming's methods, it meant that he was confident in his own strength. Moreover, he didn't show any mercy when dealing with the mass-produced Yulidim that were scared out of their wits. He didn't even treat the mass-produced Yulidim as his own kind and directly captured them as weapons to kill the few mass-produced Yulidim that tried to escape. In addition, this prototype Yulidim brought the mass-produced Yulidim to the southwest mountains. It was very likely that he wanted to bypass the front line of the demonic beasts and go to the Uruk. Such a smart, powerful, and resourceful demonic beast. If this guy was allowed to return to the fir forest, who knew how much damage it would cause to the demonic beast's front line? I can't let him go. This was Wu Ming's thought at the moment. Coincidentally, Yulidim also had the same thought at the moment. From the beginning, Yulidim commanded the mass-produced Yulidim to ambush and hunt. In fact, he was preparing to devour the traitor of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The cunning kobold Yulidim clearly knew that his compatriot Lachima, Wu Ming, had betrayed the mother goddess. Hunting Lachima would not only help the mother goddess get rid of a scourge, but it would also strengthen itself by devouring its own kind. Why not? I can't let him go. This was also Yulidim's thought at the moment. A servant and a demonic beast looked at each other. A battle was about to break out. Roar! Yulidim roared. He didn't use any weapons and rushed at Wu Ming barehanded. It seemed that he was very confident in his physical strength. Wu Ming, on the other hand, used the Yggdrasil spell on the staff of Anzirgong to test Yulidim. Fire, ice, holy light, darkness, lightning, and even poison. All sorts of magical attacks were unleashed by the staff of Ainziergan, but none of them had any effect on Ulidim. However, no matter what, these spells should have been able to hinder Ulidim for a moment or two. In the end, Ulidim didn't seem to be hindered at all. In the blink of an eye, it had reached Wuming's side and used its sharp claws to viciously swipe at Wuming. Although Tiamat and the 11 beasts were all defeated and killed by Sumer, this didn't mean that the 11 beasts were weak. On the contrary, they were very strong. The 11 sons that Tiamat gave birth to did not possess the authority of a god because they were demonic beasts. They were only born as demonic beasts that far surpassed the Sumer gods in terms of physical strength. They perfectly matched the strength of the demonic beasts born by the gods of creation. The magic of the staff of Anziergong had no effect on Ulidim, one of the 11 demonic beasts that could fight against the gods. Wuming, who had guessed this result, used the substitute magic of the staff of Anziergong to block Ulidim's claw attack. Then, Wuming put the staff of Anziergong aside and let it float beside him. Then, he unhurriedly took out an ancient book from the golden ripples and opened it. It was the nameless spellbook that Wuming hadn't used for a long time. The nameless spellbook recorded all the magic related to YGGDRSALL. Logically speaking, it should not have any offensive capabilities. The only reason the Shuoyu Mansion's temple could use the power of the nameless spellbook to release magic was because the Shuoyu Mansion was a silent temple. Therefore, he had a deep understanding of the useless Wuming of the nameless spellbook. As early as the root, Wuming had already transformed the nameless spellbook into a spell book that could release the magic recorded in the book. If this was put in the lunar world, it would be the original spell book of the original spell book. In short, it was a super dangerous original spell book. Since Wuming wanted to make a cameo appearance as caster, then he would definitely make a good cameo appearance. For example, he would use this spell book. At the moment when Wuming took out the spell book, Ulidim, who felt a sense of crisis, quickly retreated and took the initiative to open a distance from Wuming. As a magical beast, its beast instinct told it that if it rushed up, it was likely to be injured. It turned out that Ulidim's feeling was not wrong. A wind blade appeared around Wuming. It was a penetrating magic that could not be defended against, and its level was naturally the 10th order. Even if Ulidim's physical fitness was high, it would still be afraid when it encountered penetrating damage. "You're quite alert." Wuming smiled. Indeed, if Ulidim rushed up just now, it would indeed be injured, or even lose an arm or a leg, so Ulidim and Wuming opened a distance. However, Silent Cry's initial goal wasn't to cast a penetrative tier 10 spell, but rather a supreme spell. The penetrative tier 10 spell was just a side dish that came along with it. At the moment when Wuming took out the nameless spellbook, he activated the plural supreme magic recorded in the nameless spellbook and entered the pre-roll. The supreme magic of Yggdrasil was a special skill with a very long pre-roll time. Generally, it was either an ambush in advance or using a krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to achieve the effect of instant activation. The supreme magic recorded in the nameless spellbook was not immune to this drawback, and it also had a very long pre-roll time. But coincidentally, Wuming happened to have a krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to instant activation. If the kobold Ulidim had rushed up, Wuming would have immediately used the krypton item, and Ulidim would have been covered by the supreme magic in an instant. But because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wuming, Ulidim did not rush up to Wuming, so Wuming did not activate the krypton item. At the same time, because supreme magic users did not have any attack power when they were pre-roll, Ulidim was not too worried. It was only a little wary because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wuming. Simply put, it did not discover the existence of a supreme magic spell. The reason why the 11 magical beasts could not defeat the gods of Sumer was because they did not have the authority of the gods. In the end, they were defeated and killed by the gods who had the authority of the gods. And the plural supreme magic was comparable to the attack of the gods' authority. What Ulidim did not know was that although it had opened a distance from Wuming, it was still within the range of the supreme magic spell. Simply put, Ulidim was already half a step into the kingdom of death. Bang! Chapter 895. Wuming suddenly crushed the hourglass-like crystal in his hand. In an instant, extreme energy covered the surroundings with Wuming as the center. Sensing the danger, Ulidim's heart trembled. The other mass-produced Ulidim also fled in all directions, but it was all in vain. The white light of destruction covered them all in an instant. With Wuming as the center, a thick pillar of light appeared in the entire southwest mountain region. The pillar shot straight into the sky. The entire Mesopotamia shook as if there was a major earthquake. Even the Abif mountain in the northwest was shaken. Although they were demonic beasts, they were still children raised by Mother Earth. At this moment, the earth was angry. Although the demonic beasts that were attacking the north wall didn't panic to the point of running away, they subconsciously stopped their current actions due to the earthquake and stood rooted to the ground. Leonidas I, who was commanding the soldiers, was also shocked by the earthquake. However, he quickly realized that the earthquake wouldn't affect the north wall much. Now, therefore, Leonidas I took the opportunity to command the soldiers to deal a heavy blow to the demonic beasts that were rooted to the ground due to their instincts. But then, the demonic beasts seemed to have been commanded and retreated one after another. Leonidas and the soldiers weren't surprised. They didn't chase after the demonic beasts. Instead, they cleaned up the battlefield. Rescuing the wounded, retrieving the corpses of the soldiers, cleaning up the wreckage of the demonic beasts, there were still many things to do. What happened over there? After that, Leonidas I looked in the direction of the pillar of light that was still continuing. Leonidas I shook his head silently. As the front line, all he needed to do was to defend. Anyway, King Gilgamesh in the Uruk must have seen it. There was no need for him to worry. Although the pterosaur acted as a carrier pigeon, it's still not as good as the wind demon. Leonidas I muttered to himself. He turned around and joined the ranks of cleaning up the battlefield. Leonidas I was right. The giant pillar of light covered such a wide area and was so powerful that the entire Mesopotamia could see it, not to mention the Uruk. The Uruk people all knelt on the ground. They all thought that God had appeared, and they all prayed devoutly. At the French skylight at the top of the tower, the sage king, Gilgamesh, who had returned from searching for the elixir of immortality for half a year, and the current chief priest, Siduri, stood together at the window and looked towards the southwest. Originally, Siduri had rushed over to report the earthquake to Gilgamesh in a panic. However, under the influence of Gilgamesh's calm aura, Siduri had also become calm. When the earthquake gradually subsided and the pillar of light slowly faded, Gilgamesh finally spoke. Hyunryong's return has already caused such a huge impact. How ostentatious! Upon hearing this, Siduri's face lit up with joy. King Gilgamesh. Are you saying that Lord Hyunryong is back? Siduri was still wondering what made King Gilgamesh put aside his work and observe. It turned out that Lord Hyunryong was back. Since Wuming and Gorgon were both injured, Gorgon was seriously injured and returned to his temple to recuperate, and Wuming directly disappeared. The Uruk people fell into a temporary panic. After that, it was Gilgamesh who spoke again to cheer the people up. The people who had not completely separated themselves from the gods naturally fell into a depression once again because of Hyunryong's return to fight against the enemy. The most serious one was Siduri. As a god who sincerely cared for the people of Mesopotamia, Hyunryong's temple was close to the Uruk and he worked for the people. Later on, he almost replaced the idol Ishtar as the Uruk city god. This made Siduri's devotion to Hyunryong surpass that of most other gods. She was even willing to sacrifice her life for Hyunryong. However, Hyunryong sacrificed himself in the process of fighting against the enemy god and disappeared again. How could this not make Siduri's heart not ache? However, as the chief priest, Siduri could not abandon her duties because of heartache and sadness. Perhaps because Gilgamesh noticed that Hyunryong's departure was a big blow to the Uruk, King Gilgamesh made a new speech to cheer up Siduri and even the entire Uruk people and restore their previous extremely optimistic state. However, this did not mean that Siduri would not be sad about Hyunryong's departure. Almost every few days, Siduri would go to the temple abandoned by Hyunryong to pray. Therefore, Siduri was quite excited when she heard the news of Hyunryong's return. Probably Hyunryong wanted to go from the highlands in the southwest to the Uruk, but he encountered Tiamat's 11 magical beasts and fought with them. As Gilgamesh spoke, he returned to the throne behind him, sat down, picked up the clay tablet, and began to deal with various affairs. "My king, should I send someone to welcome Lord Xianlong?" Greeting the return of a deity that he had devoutly believed in was something that should be done. Not only that, since Wuming could fight with the enemy in the southwest, it must mean that there were enemies there. Since there were enemies, it was hard to guarantee that there would be reinforcements. In the current situation, if more than half of the 11 sons of Tiamat besieged Hyunryong, there would definitely be an accident. A lot of things had happened in the past 6 months. After Gorgon was seriously injured by Wuming's self-destruction, he had been holed up in his temple in the fir forest all day long. Because of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon, the magical beasts produced by Gorgon were basically affected, causing a lot of casualties. The north wall was not attacked for a long time. However, on a certain day 3 months later, a large number of magical beasts flocked to the north wall, and there were 11 magical beast commanders with strength comparable to gods. They called themselves the 11 sons of Tiamat, and the existence that looked like Enkidu was one of them. If King Gilgamesh did not summon many servants to assassinate the 11 commanders at the cost of sacrificing themselves to buy time for the north wall, perhaps the north wall would have been breached by now. Even if Gorgon himself came in person, he would definitely choose to retreat after receiving that attack. "Don't worry about Hyunryong," Gilgamesh said while constantly changing the clay tablet in his hand. One by one, he quickly corrected the instructions on the clay tablet. Gilgamesh saw the attack just now. That kind of attack was like the combination of multiple military noble phantoms. Even Gorgon would certainly be injured, let alone the magical beasts. But Siduri still wanted to say something, but at this time, Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked up as if he could not stand Siduri anymore. "Which servants are there in the south now?" Chapter 896. Siduri's veiled face revealed a hint of joy. Judging from King Gilgamesh's words, did he agree to support and welcome Lord Hyunryong back? "Yes, my king. Chaldea has just been sent by my king to the southern jungle to support the feathered serpent god." However, before Siduri could finish her sentence, Gilgamesh instantly interrupted her. "Then let Chaldea welcome Hyunryong. Moreover, they have formed a bond with Hyunryong. They are the best candidates." After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he once again picked up the clay tablet with his clawed hand. At this moment, there were still many things waiting for him to deal with in Mesopotamia. He couldn't afford to waste a single second. If he delayed any longer, he wouldn't even have time to sleep. "Bond? My king, are you referring to the matter of the master of Chaldea possessing Lord Hyunryong's scale?" Siduri clearly remembered that when Merlin brought Chaldea and her party to the Uruk, when they approached the shrine of Hyunryong in the Uruk, the girl took out the scale because it was hot and was coincidentally discovered by Siduri. After seeing that the scale was connected to the shrine, Siduri reported the matter to King Gilgamesh. According to the master of Chaldea, the scale was a gift from a friend who had helped them in other singularities. It was said that it would be useful in this singularity. Siduri still remembered King Gilgamesh's reaction at that time. After learning about this matter, King Gilgamesh did not seem to care. However, when he met the master of Chaldea, the first thing he asked was to see the hot dragon scale. He was obviously anxious, but he had to show a calm expression. Siduri did not know what to say about King Gilgamesh. After confirming that it was a dragon scale condensed from Hyunryong's magic, Gilgamesh was very happy to give the master of Chaldea and her followers an extraordinary trial. At that time, Siduri wondered if King Gilgamesh wanted to kill Chaldea and her party. After that, it was said that the people in the Chaldea organization were in an uproar. It would be a joke if they died in the hands of their allies after passing through 6 singularities. However, because of this, Chaldea also confirmed that King Gilgamesh was really a former tyrant. In short, a certain person who sounded like a loser to Siduri had a shadow in her heart. In the end, it was King Gilgamesh's court magician, Merlin, who brought Chaldea and her party back. Under the condition of not touching King Gilgamesh's bottom line, he helped Chaldea and her party a little. This allowed Chaldea and her party to barely pass the trial. This king is especially strict with outsiders who suddenly join because the entire Mesopotamia has become extremely dangerous. Although you barely passed, you completed it with the help of Merlin. This is enough to prove that you are not qualified. You should train in the Uruk for a period of time first, bastards. Siduri wanted to complain. It was King Gilgamesh who was interested in Chaldea and her party because King Hyunryong entrusted them with a dragon scale and went overboard. However, what King Gilgamesh said was true. The current situation in Mesopotamia was extremely dangerous. The strengthened demons and the number of demon commanders that still existed not only made the northern wall miserable, but also made Uruk, the rear of the army, constantly vigilant. One of the 11 sons of Tiamat, a 4-legged serpent-type demon known as Musu Hushio. Half a year ago, when the 11 demon commanders appeared, they led a large number of Musu Hushio to attack Uruk from underground. Because of the sudden attack, they had to sacrifice a servant called Saber, swordsman, summoned by King Gilgamesh to suppress the demons that attacked from the ground. However, the demonic beast commander who personally led the demonic beasts to attack was also killed. In terms of war losses, neither side gained an advantage. The demonic beasts lost an extremely powerful demonic beast commander, and the human side lost an equally powerful servant. Although there were no more incidents of monsters attacking from underground, Gilgamesh still carried out a defense against the monsters underground. In a very short period of time, he successfully developed a powerful barrier called Nabiston's Tooth and buried it under the Uruk. Not only that, King Gilgamesh also carried out a series of defenses against the sky, the 2 rivers, the Persian Gulf, and even the highlands in the southwest. Even Siduri had to admit that King Gilgamesh was really a genius. But strangely, since the beginning of Mushio Hushio's surprise attack on the Uruk, there were no such monster attacks in the past 6 months. Perhaps they were too cautious, but almost all the monsters attacked from the north. However, King Gilgamesh proposed the possibility of waiting for the humans to relax and then take them down in one fell swoop. Therefore, even if there were no monster attacks, they had to be vigilant in the rear. Therefore, when Gilgamesh said that the master of Chaldea was not qualified, he was not completely looking for an excuse. There was a certain reason behind it. After that, King Gilgamesh arranged the so-called Chaldean embassy for Chaldea's group in the Uruk. He really let them do a variety of things in the Uruk, such as building walls, weeding, feeding livestock, shearing sheep, removing rats in the sewer, and other things that were quite boring but interesting. The significance of this was that Chaldea's master and her followers had successfully integrated into the Uruk. And just yesterday, after Siduri reported the situation of Chaldea's master to King Gilgamesh received information from the Quetzalcoatl through the small pterosaur. A large number of monsters had been discovered in the southern jungles, and there were even signs of monsters coming ashore from the Persian Gulf. However, the monsters had become their own people, and the Quetzalcoatl worked together with Gilgamesh's soldiers to repel them. Although such a situation was rare, monsters would invade from the southwest jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. But since it was related to monsters, the Quetzalcoatl would still report it to Gilgamesh. However, Gilgamesh did not pay much attention to it. After all, monsters did try to invade from the south jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. Therefore, after realizing that Chaldea's group had enough time to train, Gilgamesh gave them their first mission, which was to support the Quetzalcoatl in the south. However, Gilgamesh understood one thing at this moment. Through the light beam on the southwest plateau today, he could confirm that the monster commanders seemed to be planning something again. However, when he thought about how they had coincidentally bumped into Wuming, Gilgamesh faintly wanted to laugh. This was the so-called coming at the right time. Chapter 897. Didn't Merlin and the servant he brought back also go with Chaldea's people? Use the small pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl to convey the news to Merlin, and let him tell the Chaldea's people that after meeting with Hyunryong, they must listen to Hyunryong's instructions just like this king. Although the Uruk also had carrier pigeons, ever since the Quetzalcoatl turned against them, the Uruk began to use the small communication pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl. It had to be said that this small pterosaur was better than the carrier pigeons in all aspects. That's all. We'll talk about other things when Hyunryong returns to the Uruk. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he stopped talking and focused on dealing with various matters on the clay tablet. Yes, King, I'll do it right away. Siduri responded and left the throne room. Southern jungle. The hot and humid environment made the group of people who came from the Uruk to support them suffer. Especially Gadotsi, the people accompanying her were either servants or subservants. Only Gadotsi was a pure human. Moreover, the magic concentration in Kanzaki was much higher than in the sixth singularity. If it weren't for the magic dress specially made for Gadotsi by Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps Gadotsi wouldn't be able to move so freely in this singularity. However, even with the magic dress, the magic atmosphere of Kanzaki and the humid tropical jungle still made Gadotsi breathless. Leopard Man, San, haven't we arrived yet? Matthew, who noticed that his senpai was quite uncomfortable at the moment, asked the servant leading them in front, the god Sama who claimed to be the leopard man but seemed to be a comedic character. As Matthew understood, this servant looked like an older girl wearing a leopard costume. The item on the ground that looked like a spear was more like a large toy than a weapon. Right away, the leopard man, who was defined as a strange servant by Matthew, turned around and smiled at Matthew rather reluctantly. Matthew was already immune to the leopard man's joking because she said this sentence several times. However, Matthew still noticed that the leopard man's expression was slightly depressed at the moment. Leopard man, San, are you okay? Matthew, who fully displayed his little personality, asked with concern. It's okay, how could the leopard man be frightened by the earthquake just now? Ah ha ha ha, there was no doubt that Miss Leopard Man was frightened. That was what Matthew judged. The appearance of the giant pillar of light caused the earthquake, and at that time, they happened to meet the leopard man outside the jungle who was about to lead them. Because the sudden earthquake was very close to the southern jungle, Gadotsi directly fell to the ground. Matthew barely supported his body to protect Gadotsi, so as to prevent the surrounding trees from collapsing and causing harm to Gadotsi. However, it seemed that the earth and trees in Kanagawa were extremely tough, and there were no signs of trees collapsing or the ground cracking. In the end, the leopard people, who had senses that surpassed that of wild beasts, were the ones who received the most severe effects, to the point of being ridiculously severe. The leopard man was so scared that he buried his head in the ground. Although this ostrich-like behavior was worthy of ridicule, what was more worthy of ridicule was that burying one's head in the ground should be more affected by the earthquake. After all, it was the earth that was shaking. In short, after the earthquake ended for some time, the leopard man pulled his head out of the ground in a daze, and he looked like he was about to leave. After that, when the leopard man led the way for them, he looked like he was trembling with fear. In short, the leopard man at this moment was very unreliable. Matthew, who understood this, sighed helplessly, but even if they didn't know when they would reach their destination, they still had to go on. Thinking of this, Matthew looked at the cloaked girl who followed them silently behind them, the servant who claimed to be Anna. Anna, who was good at using sides, didn't panic much during the earthquake. She was almost unaffected by the earthquake. It could only be said that even if she was petite and looked weak, she was still worthy of being called a servant. Subconsciously, Matthew felt that he was still immature. As for the leopard man, Matthew subconsciously ignored her. "Miss Anna, do you know where Merlin went?" Matthew asked Anna. Originally, as a court magician, Merlin should have stayed in the Uruk temple to serve King Gilgamesh, but under King Gilgamesh's order, May, as a court magician, and Anna followed Gadotsi and Matthew to the southern jungle. As for why Matthew asked Anna this, it was entirely because Merlin told Anna to remember to protect the two of them during the earthquake and quickly left. "I don't know, probably he went to the epicenter." Hearing Matthew's question, Anna's purple eyes under the cloak looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before, and no one knew what she was thinking. Seeing this, Matthew also looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before. When Merlin left, he did go in that direction. Probably he really went to investigate the situation. Mr. Merlin is really reliable. Matthew thought so. After that, Matthew saw that Anna didn't answer anymore, so he didn't ask anymore. After all, a good relationship has to be done step by step. On the other side, in the place where the giant pillar of light disappeared, Merlin, unlike Castor, walked quickly in the mountains and jumped to a relatively high mountain. Oh, this is really amazing. Fufu heard the sound of someone wanting to kick someone. Not far from Merlin, there was a huge pit that could be called a basin. This huge pit was the trace of the giant pillar of light. Around the huge pit and even in the center, there was a thick black smoke, but the black smoke was dissipating quickly. If you don't look closely, you won't see it at all. As expected of a Villo, it seems that those magical beasts should have been killed by you. Merlin didn't know who he was talking to, but his tone of praise was a little funny. "You mean the kobold?" Wu Ming's figure slowly came out of the smoke. Although he came out of the smoke, Wu Ming's clothes didn't have the slightest trace of contamination. Merlin judged that Wu Ming probably wrapped himself with magic to avoid being contaminated by the smoke. But this guy is really strong, worthy of being one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Merlin, who was looking in the direction of Wu Ming, slightly widened his eyes. Because behind Wu Ming, a huge kobold body was following Wu Ming. No, it wasn't following Wu Ming. Instead, it was being dragged by Wu Ming with one hand. Chapter 898. Wu Ming dragged the blackened World of Warcraft Eulidium with one hand. When he walked out of the smoke, Wu Ming threw Eulidium heavily. Thump. There was a loud noise, and dust flew everywhere. With Wu Ming's strength and Eulidium's body weight, a huge crater was created on the ground. As expected of our British silver dragon, Vero. Speaking of which, is he dead? Merlin jumped down from the high ground and walked unhurriedly to the large piece of mixed black flesh. Although I think it should be dead after taking that hit, it's a pity. Wu Ming shook his head. This guy was still alive. It could only be said that it was worthy of being the original demon born from Tiamat. Its body was so strong that it was able to survive such an attack. Wu Ming's attack just now was multiple super-level magic, and this guy was still alive. Even if it was a servant, it would not survive such an attack, unless it had a special skill or a special noble artifact. But those mass-produced Eulidium should be dead. If multiple super-level magic couldn't even kill a mass-produced Eulidium, then it would be too cheap. It's not hard to understand why this guy is still alive. This is the so-called prototype. According to King Gilgamesh and my judgment, they are indeed Tiamat's the 11 sons. Merlin poked Eulidium with his staff and told Wu Ming his information. I've fought with it before, so I'm pretty sure of this. Then, Wu Ming walked to Eulidium's head and created a weapon with a high-grade item. He was ready to pierce Eulidium's brain through its eyes and kill it completely. Why did you abandon your mission and come to me? The reason Merlin appeared in this place must be because he had a mission. Otherwise, why would a court magician like him come to this border? While Wu Ming was talking, Eulidium's body shook a little. It was the desire to live. Wait. Wait. If it's not dead, don't kill it. Merlin grabbed Wu Ming's hand and quickly stopped Wu Ming's action, saving Eulidium, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Eulidium, who was still conscious, heaved a sigh of relief. Thanks to the mother goddess, Eulidium could breathe more air between heaven and earth. It felt like he was in the embrace of the mother goddess. It's Tiamat's son, and it's an existence that can be communicated with. It's a pity to kill it. In other words, Merlin wanted to take Eulidium as a prisoner to obtain information. Let me say this first. I don't think you can get any useful information. Wu Ming knew what Merlin wanted to do. It was nothing more than to use an illusion to obtain information. However, Wu Ming didn't think highly of Merlin, or rather, he didn't think highly of the magical beast. Wu Ming didn't think that this magical beast had any information in its head. The plan of the magical beasts was nothing more than to attack the humans. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Silent Wonder wasn't exaggerating. Since Silent Wonder had returned, he wasn't afraid of not being able to stop the attack of the magical beasts, even if it was a strengthened version of the magical beasts. No, Villo. A lot has happened in the 6 months you left Uruk. The magical beasts have undergone earth-shattering changes, and they have caused a very serious impact on this world. At that moment, Merlin didn't care about Eulidium's presence. He told Wu Ming some things. Half a year ago, 11 magical beast commanders who called themselves the 11 sons of Tiamat appeared. In order to eliminate the magical beast commanders, a magical beast commander attacked the Uruk and killed all his servants. The Sage King summoned new servants and established new defense systems in the sky, rivers, lakes, underground, and so on. Although it was just a general description and didn't explain the details, if the audience was Wu Ming, they would definitely understand. Don't think that it's easy for you to defeat Eulidium. This is a magical beast comparable to a god-level servant. Wu Ming was also aware of this fact. Previously, Eulidium had used only his body to resist the multiple supreme-level spells he had cast. Although Eulidium was already half-dead, the fact that he could withstand multiple supreme-level spells without dying was enough to prove his strength as a demon commander. Moreover, the servants summoned by King Gilgamesh basically killed a few magical beast commanders at the cost of 2 to 1 or even 3 to 1. That was why Gilgamesh chose to summon new servants. After all, there was a shortage of manpower. It seemed that the Uruk side was able to eliminate the magical beast commander that attacked the Uruk in a suicidal manner. It could be said that they took a big advantage. However, Wu Ming said this. I really didn't mean to underestimate the magical beast commander. He didn't underestimate the magical beast commander. This made Merlin feel very helpless, so Merlin continued to explain. Since the magical beast commander has good wisdom, then we can't treat the magical beasts as beasts. Merlin's implication was that they must treat the other side as a country where soldiers are magical beasts. Since they could capture one of the generals alive, naturally, they couldn't kill it easily. They had to squeeze out the last bit of value before killing it. If this kobold Eulidium knew about this, he would definitely call Merlin a monster. Anyway, I didn't mean to refute you. You can do whatever you want. Shrugging his shoulders, Wu Ming walked to the side and removed the weapon in his hand. The weapon turned into blue magic particles and dissipated. Yes, you've helped me a lot, Merlin nodded with a smile, then walked to the front of Eulidium, who had lost the ability to resist. Then, he gently tapped Eulidium's head with his staff. Alright, Eulidium of Warcraft, relax. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you like a dream. Then, Eulidium fell into an illusion that Wu Ming could not see. After about a minute or two, Merlin dispelled the hallucinating spell, and the last trace of Eulidium's life force dissipated. What did you do to it? Wuming glanced at the lifeless Eulidium, then looked at Merlin strangely. "Ah, nothing, nothing," Merlin laughed proudly, which made Wuming speechless. It had to be said that in comparison, Merlin was even more ruthless than Wuming. "Anyway, I've already obtained information about the magical beasts." Then, Merlin quietly looked at Wuming. "How about it, Villo? Do you want to hear it?" Wuming snapped his fingers in response to Merlin. "Paw!" The instant he snapped his fingers, Eulidium's corpse instantly burst into flames. Although Eulidium had said that he wanted to eat Wuming, Wuming was not perverted enough to eat Eulidium. However, the sudden burst of flames gave Merlin a fright. Clearly, this was Wuming's answer to Merlin's question. Okay, calm down, I'll tell you now." As the flames burned, Merlin told him the information he had obtained from Eulidium's mind. Chapter 899. The magical beasts are preparing to attack the north wall and destroy it in one fell swoop. "Is that so?" Wuming replied to Merlin unhappily. After all, this didn't seem to be any important information. Not only that, the magical beasts are also preparing to launch a fierce feint attack on humans from the mountains in the northeast, the Persian Gulf in the southeast, and the highlands in the southwest. Depending on the conditions, they will turn the feint attack into their main force. If that's the case, we will be in danger. The strengthened magical beasts posed a great threat to humans. If 2 or 3 people could barely deal with an ordinary magical beast in the past, now it would take nearly 10 people to deal with an ordinary magical beast. Moreover, if it weren't for King Gilgamesh calmly issuing new defense regulations and strengthening the defenses of the North Wall and even other areas, the Uruk wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than half a year. But even so, the North Wall could only barely hold on. It wouldn't be surprising if it was broken through at any time. And if the number of magical beasts was large enough to besiege the Uruk from all directions, the humans in Mesopotamia would be completely finished. Merlin told Wuming about this analysis and also some details about the magical beasts, reminding Wuming not to underestimate them. "I see, it's already that serious." At this moment, Wuming had a thorough understanding of the current situation. Wuming even wondered if Gidea had made some changes to the last singularity. Then, Wuming realized a problem. Speaking of which, does the commander of the magical beasts want to break the agreement of the 3 goddesses and include the Quetzalcoatl in the attack? Or has the fact that the Quetzalcoatl changed sides been exposed? The mountains in the southwest were adjacent to the forest of the Quetzalcoatl. Even if they went around the edge of the Uruk, they would still be considered to have stepped into the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. However, if they did so, they would be considered to have crossed the border. Therefore, if they wanted to cross the border and attack the Uruk from the southwest, they would have to face the wrath of the Quetzalcoatl. Although the commander of the beasts was at the level of a deity, the Quetzalcoatl was still one of the 3 goddesses in the alliance, an existence equal to Gorgon. Since they were intelligent, they wouldn't do something so ridiculous. Because the goddess of the underworld is unable to leave the underworld, the magical beast commanders haven't had any designs on her for the time being. I don't know whether the feathered god has been exposed or not, but from Eulidium's memories, the feathered god has indeed been included in their list of targets to be destroyed along with the humans. Through Eulidium's memories, Merlin knew that there would be a new magic beast commander coming to support Eulidium, preparing to annihilate the humans along with the feathered god. As for whether or not the feathered god's betrayal of the 3 goddesses' alliance was exposed, Merlin had no way of knowing. If the feathered god has to face more than 3 magical beast commanders, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the feathered god to deal with them, Merlin judged. The Quetzalcoatl that appeared in this world was only a servant. Even if it was a servant at the level of a god, it was still a clone. When facing the 11 sons of Tiamat, it was inevitable that it would not be able to do much. It's better not to underestimate the feathered god. Wuming did not think that the feathered god, as the main deity of South America, would be weak. Although Wuming used Enkidu to capture the feathered god at that time, if the feathered god had refused, the result would have been unpredictable. The most important thing was that the feathered god's heart was with the humans. Wu Ming only told the feathered god the fact that there is still hope for the humans, so the feathered god finally chose to compromise. King Gilgamesh also has great expectations for the feathered god. After the feathered god defected to our side, Gilgamesh let the feathered god expand the scope of the jungle, including the entire south and southwest into the feathered god's jungle. This is to guard against the magical beasts that try to bypass the north wall from the southwest plateau. Letting the feathered god guard the southwest was part of Gilgamesh's defense plan. However, it's better to be cautious. The servants on the human side dared to gamble, but the humans could not afford to gamble at the moment. If they failed, it was likely that they would lose everything. I'll go back to Uruk first and see the king. The current situation was not something that Wu Ming and Merlin could decide. They had to discuss it with Gilgamesh. By the way, why did you come to the remote border? Merlin didn't answer this question from the beginning. If it wasn't for the fact that Wu Ming was going to Uruk to find Gilgamesh, he almost forgot to ask Merlin the purpose of coming here. Actually, I accompanied the people of Chaldea to support the feathered god. When Merlin said that, Wu Ming's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Tachika and the others have arrived. They just arrived in Uruk not long ago. After being trained by King Gilgamesh, they began to carry out the king's first order. And that order was to support the jungle in the south. Sure enough, the speed of time passing is not the same. Wu Ming said to himself for a while. The speed of time passing was not the same, Wu Ming already knew that, so Wu Ming didn't make a fuss about it. If that's the case, then I won't go to Uruk for now. No matter what, he had to meet Gadotsi and the others first. At this moment, a small pterosaur descended from the sky and came to Merlin's side. Oh, is this news from King Gilgamesh? Merlin untied the clay tablet fixed on the small pterosaur's back and handed it to Wu Ming. It must be related to you, you can take a look first. Indeed, as Merlin guessed, the clay tablet said that Merlin and Chaldea were to find Wu Ming and meet up with him, and they were to follow Wu Ming's instructions in the following operation. It's just for you to meet up with me. Wu Ming didn't read it out loud. After reading it, he crushed the clay tablet. Hey, I haven't read it yet. If King Gilgamesh knows about this, he will definitely blame me. Merlin looked like he was going to suffer. Don't I know you? Your skin is thicker than Chaldea. Wu Ming's implication was that Gilgamesh's scolding would not affect Merlin, and Merlin would still eat and drink as usual. As expected of my best friend, Villo, you really understand me, Merlin laughed shamelessly. Let's go find Tachika and the others. Ignoring Merlin, Wu Ming stepped forward and walked in the direction of the jungle. Not good. Merlin's sudden shout made Wu Ming turn around helplessly. What's wrong? Because I fell behind halfway, I'm not sure where the destination is. Sorry. Merlin had an apologetic expression, but no matter how Wu Ming looked at it, Merlin's face was full of annoyance. If I'm not mistaken, it's Eridu. I've been there before, follow me. Thank you so much, as expected of my best friend. Accompanied by Merlin's strange laughter, the two entered the jungle from the opposite direction.